IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. This is a big one. I'm joined by Vince D'Addario. Vince is so fired up, he doesn't even have a IB stuff on. He's got Notre Dame gear.
I went old school.
He is ready to roll, son.
Tattered sleeves.
Yep, Trev Roberts is down there, guys. We are going to recap the college football playoff rankings. We're going to, as they go live, we will go live. We will kind of talk about yesterday's games while they're doing all their stuff. Once they go into the rankings, we will immediately cut whatever we're doing and go into the rankings. We'll give a live recap of it. Once they announce the seeding, we will break all of it down. We'll break down what it means for Notre Dame. We'll break down what it means for the rest of college football as well, and dive into the Notre Dame first-round matchup. We'll dive into the matchup of other teams. We're going to do all of it, man. It's going to be a fun show, fellas, and I cannot wait. What a wild day of football yesterday.
I mean, if you're a Notre Dame fan, which I assume most people in the chat are, and look, it could have gone worse for Notre Dame yesterday. It could have. It definitely could have gone worse, but it didn't go great. And there's a lot of people in the chat that are like, yeah, Notre Dame should be the 5, and I don't really disagree with that, but that's also not the reality.
Yeah,
you're going to be disappointed.
Out the difference between what they will be
right.
versus what they should be.
Right.
Potentially, Vince. There's a couple ways. Just quickly do the ad read, get that out of the way, and then we'll dive right into it, and we'll be ready to rock and roll, because this is going to be an interesting discussion, fellas, as we recap yesterday.
All right. If you've been following along this season, you already know it's been a wild ride, and we're only halfway through, and the favorites are cashing in at a historic rate. I've been using MyBookie all season. It's been paying off big time. If you're wondering where to start, I got a little cheat code for you. Risk-free Thursdays. Every Thursday, take advantage of a no-pressure bet that's there to help you build up your bankroll. It's under the Bet Boost tab in the sportsbook, and you'll see it. It's basically a free shot at some extra cash, and who doesn't love that? And look, I get why people might ask, why MyBookie, but here's my take. They make it easy for us to bet smart and bet big. It's not about throwing out random parlays. It's about finding value and making plays that make sense. Funny thing is, when I need a break from betting, I always end up in the live casino. Blackjack on a Friday night? Count me in. For those who haven't jumped in yet, use promo code IRISH on your first deposit, and they'll double your money instantly. I'm talking extra cash in your account right away, no wait or hassle. And you can use it on any game that you want. So you can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie.
So, guys, yesterday, first night went pretty well for Notre Dame. Obviously, UNLV getting beat by Boise State didn't have much of an impact on Notre Dame. But the Army win over Tulane, huge win over Tulane, certainly did.
Sure.
Yesterday started off kind of, Miami, Ohio getting beat. I don't know that Miami, Ohio winning the MAC at 9-4 was going to move the needle for Notre Dame one way or the other. Arizona State with a huge win over Iowa State doesn't really impact Notre Dame as far as their seeding. It could impact who Notre Dame plays in either round one or round two. But then you get the Georgia win over Texas, which vaults a team that was behind Notre Dame ahead of Notre Dame. And then now it's like, okay, well, what are they going to do with Texas? Then you have Penn State losing to Oregon in a game where Penn State was never really going to win that game, but they kept it within a touchdown constantly. They were down 18, then down 7. And so how does the committee view that? Then you have a crazy game in the ACC that I actually turned off, guys. When Clemson went up 31-14, I was like, all right, I'm just going to focus on this Oregon-Penn State game. And then they showed an update during the Penn State-Oregon game where it said SMU has scored to make it 31-24, and they've got the ball back. And I went back and turned it over. SMU scored that touchdown. And I was like, well, this is going to go to overtime, and SMU is going to win because they've got all the momentum. And this is why you don't make those type of predictions right in the middle of a game. Big kick return, and the kicker makes the kick of his life. That kid will never make a bigger field goal than that, in my opinion. And just a phenomenal moment for that young man and that team. Did not think Clemson had what it took to win that game. Trev called it. SMU was not ready for the moment. That's really what he said. I mean, you could see just the way they played. That was not your typical SMU team. Trev nailed that prediction. They were not ready for the moment. They figured it out, but by the time they figured it out, it was too little too late, guys. But a tremendously valiant effort by SMU. And now the question is, was that enough to keep SMU in? Do they fall out now? If they keep – and here's kind of my theory, guys, and we'll just dive right into this as in reaction to the games from yesterday. I look at it like this, Vince. if SMU stays in, Notre Dame will fall. And the justification is going to be we can't drop SMU and we're not going to drop Penn State or Texas, right? If we see that Bama's in and SMU has fallen out, then I think they're going to be forced to move Notre Dame above at least one of Penn State or Texas. Because I think the committee members are smart enough to know that if we drop the ACC champ who lost by a field goal on the last second and we leave Penn State, the Big Ten, or excuse me, if we drop the ACC runner-up and we leave the Big Ten and SEC runner-up where they are, we're going to get crushed. And Ward Manuel has said we are going to – teams that are ranked where they are will not have any movement, meaning Ohio State won't go above Notre Dame. And that's the example he used. So, they're not going to move ahead of Notre Dame, but they can move within the seeding together, meaning they could go ahead of Penn State or Texas or whatever, depending on the outcome of the game. So those are going to be very interesting aspects of this, guys. Very interesting aspects of how this is going to play out based on some wild results yesterday. I think this was the best case scenario for those of you that want to see the committee put in a tough spot. Worst scenario if you're looking for something easy and this totally makes a lot of sense.
I mean, there was a lot to take in yesterday. If you're watching the SEC championship in the afternoon and you're a Notre Dame fan, you're thinking to yourself, I like my chances. If you're another, I like your chances if you're a Notre Dame fan, right? Both teams played pretty sloppy. It was not a good game. They left a lot of points on the field, specifically Texas. And then, of course, Georgia loses their starting quarterback. And, credit to them. They rallied behind the backup and ended up scoring, I think, more points with him than they did with their starter. But, is that sustainable? And how long is Carson Beck out? So all of those questions, I think, still loom for Georgia. And then, you move into the night games. And look, I'll be the first one to say it. Penn State played way better than I anticipated them playing. They matched Oregon score for score there for a little while, which I was shocked about, to be perfectly honest with you. And, they proved that they can play. Now, they still lost, obviously. They still made enough mistakes where they lost. I think part of it is that Oregon was anticipating Ohio State, and they might have taken Penn State a little, might not have taken them as seriously as they may have Ohio State. Maybe. It's still a championship game. You still have to bring your A game and all of that. But I think on the flip side, it also showed that Oregon's defense is not infallible by any stretch of the imagination if they let Penn State do what they did offensively. So there's a lot going on, man, that is
Trev,
exciting.
Sorry, man. I also want to you guys, I also want to give credit to Penn State. Like, they battled their butts off.
Oh, 100%.
You know what I mean? Like, they played hard yesterday. They did. Now, again, I think they proved yesterday that they're not a top 5 team. I mean, they literally never led in this game. Oregon went up 7-0 at the 10:40 mark, and Penn State, the closest they could ever get it was to 4. I mean, that was the closest it ever was. And a big chunk of the game, it was a double-digit game. I mean, the entire second quarter, it was a double-digit game. And, from 13:04 to 1:53, it was a double-digit game. You know what I mean? And then Oregon went back up double digits middle of the third quarter, stayed that way till the 14-minute mark of the fourth quarter. Oregon went back up by 15. It was exactly like the Notre Dame Louisville game that we've talked about yesterday. Now, will the committee just say, well, 7-point game?
Yes, that's exactly what they'll do.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. But, so that's the interesting thing. And I know there's a lot of stuff. Guys, we understand about the leaks that are out. We don't know if those leaks are genuine or not. So, we're not going to pay attention to that. When it comes out, it'll come out. But I'll be surprised, guys, as I was looking this morning, I was surprised at how many people one of you guys has your TV on. Can you turn the sound off for that?
It's not me.
So, okay. But that's going to be the thing you find out is, guys, is what do they do? I was surprised how many people had Notre Dame at 5, to be honest with you. I did a thing. I looked at the ESPN rankings, and like over half the ESPN people had Notre Dame at 5. A couple others had them at 6, and only 4 had them at 7, which I thought was very interesting, Trevor, when you look at where they're placing Notre Dame. I don't know that I buy that, but that's where Bill Bender from Sporting News had Notre Dame at 6, with, I think, Texas ahead of them and Penn State behind them, which I thought was interesting as well.
Yeah, man. I mean, overall, I would say I'm just excited to kind of in here sometime in the next half an hour, we can finally put a lot of the speculation to rest, and we can finally start having I don't want to say conversations of substance, but conversations surrounding, okay, this is what the matchup is. No more, hey, so-and-so beat this team in week 4, so they should be here, not here. But no, last night was crazy. The conference games were fantastic, and every team showed me a little bit of something that I didn't think that they had. I mean, we talk about the Clemson SMU game, and the moment was too big for SMU. However, in a game where the moment was still too big for them, they gave themselves the opportunity to take the game into overtime, which is something that I hope the committee takes into their consideration when voting who's in, who's out. I was talking to Vince before the show started, and the committee put themselves in a weird spot about talking about, they're not really going to penalize anybody for losing in their conference championship, but then also in the same light saying that they're not going to. The teams that are already ranked that weren't playing are basically set where they're at in pertains to where they are respectively. So it's going to be interesting to see what the committee decides to do there. But with Notre Dame specifically, with the outcome of the SEC championship and how the Big Ten championship played out, I'm going to be really interested to see where they fall. Because I will say, Penn State never led, but I was under the impression that if that game turned into a shootout and Oregon's offense started humming, Penn State had no chance. And I didn't forecast Penn State hanging 37 points on Oregon. Now, there were question marks around Oregon's defense, and I think it's more of a testament to the matchup, right? Brian, you talk about it all the time. Is college football now, especially this year, is a game of matchups. And Oregon's had a lot of questions around their rush defense this year. It's been good in some weeks, not so good in other weeks. And Nicholas Singleton and their other Katron Allen are 2 quality running backs. They haven't faced a tight end yet, like the Warren kids. So that game was interesting for me. Penn State showed me a little bit of something to where I thought if Oregon scores 45, Penn State maybe puts 14 on the board in meaningful minutes. So they proved me wrong. And I'll be the first person to admit, if I'm wrong about a prediction, I was wrong about it. So
well, you weren't. You were right. We were wrong. You got that one right.
So I'm going to be interested to see where the committee puts Texas, where they put Penn State, because yes, the game went to overtime. It was a 3-point game, but Texas also lost to essentially Georgia's backup quarterback. So how much does that play a factor? So
I am very curious, guys, how the second half of that game impacts Georgia's run, because Georgia was forced to finally start running the football, and they looked like an old Georgia team. Like they absolutely did. That was a very interesting realization. People say, well, they'll get Carson Beck back. And I'm like, maybe, but they better learn a lesson from what they did in the second half to Texas. I think it also is a wake-up call to Steve Sarkisian saying, dude, you got to get a little bit tougher. Your team has got to get a little bit tougher. They coached afraid of the Georgia front.
Big time.
The Georgia front that UMass ran for over 200 yards on. The Georgia front that Georgia Tech said, we're going right at you. Not having Kelvin Banks hurt, no question. But losing one offensive lineman should not cause you to be afraid of that team. So that's a big part of it, guys, looking at that matchup is going to make it very, very interesting to see if Georgia, what lessons those two teams learn from that game and how do they get applied. And I think Georgia has a better chance of applying the lessons they need because they can just start running the ball more. Texas's fixes may be more you got to go into the portal, you got to recruit better, you got to develop better for an entire offseason to be a little bit more physical team. But I watched one of their D tackles on that last touchdown drive just get blown into the end, just blown off the ball. And you're like, this team was not ready for the physicality of that game. That's what I missed in this matchup, is because we haven't seen that from Georgia a whole lot. And we didn't see it from Georgia in the first half. Guys, I mean, Texas had chances to blow that game open in the first half.
They blew it.
You and I were watching it together, and I was like, dude, they're gonna completely blow this opportunity. They had a chance to take that lead. You cannot allow a team like Georgia, because one thing you got to say about Georgia, for all their flaws, they don't quit.
Yeah.
They will not fold. They did not fold down 28-0 to Bama. They did not fold down 17-0 to Georgia Tech. This team will not quit, and Texas missed a ton of opportunities. And when Carson Beck got hurt, Georgia came out in the second half, so we're going to run it right down your freaking throat, and they did. And the only reason Texas even had a chance at the end was because of that terrible interception that Gunnar Stockton threw.
Yeah.
And then again, they got into the red zone, and they couldn't do anything with it because they have no ability to just kind of get in your face and run at you. And
two missed field goals didn't help either.
Notre Dame did this season when they lost all their offensive linemen. Texas lose their left tackle, and that program, the way they've recruited, completely changed how they played. And it made for a very fascinating game. But look, guys, Georgia's a flawed football team, in my opinion.
Yes.
But I'll tell you one thing I will not question that team is their heart. They do not quit. Did Georgia Tech get screwed last week? Yes, they did. The officiating helped. But you know what? If Georgia quits, the officiating can't help you. If Georgia doesn't battle, the officiating can't help you. Right? If that's the line you want to go with. Same thing yesterday. Did I think that it was officiated balanced? No, I didn't. I felt like it was a kind of a pro Georgia officiating crew. But you know what? Texas, you had your chances.
Oh, absolutely.
And Georgia kept fighting, and Georgia took it to you in the second half. It's like the Michigan cheating thing and how, that's the only reason they've beat Ohio State. Well, they didn't have that this year, and they still beat Ohio State. Why?
Correct.
Because they are a more physical football team than Ohio State. And until Ohio State figures out how to be more physical, they're going to keep getting beat by teams like that. And until Texas is like, hey, we can't just be speedy. We can't be athletic. We can't be scheme all the time. We've got to be a team that can come out here and play physical football. And until they figure that out, we're gonna see games like this from Texas, in my opinion.
Well, I think one thing to expand on your point, Brian, about what Georgia was able to do in the second half, if there's one takeaway that I have from conference championship weekend as a whole, looking at all the big impactful games, is it's a team's ability to run the football. You have all of these high octane quarterback names. You know what I mean? You had, Dylan Gabriel, you had Drew Aller, you had Quinn Ewers, you had Carson Beck, all these names thrown in there. And the reason why some of these games were so competitive or lopsided was because the team's ability to run the football, which if you're a Notre Dame fan, that should bring a lot of excitement to you for this playoff run. I mean it. I mean, you go back there, you look at what Boise State was able to do to UNLV. Ashton Genty did Ashton Genty things. But then there's some people that were like, well, it's Ashton Genty. He does that to every defense. Sure. Look what Cam Scatteroo did at Arizona State. And he absolutely tore up Iowa State's defense. That's why that game was so lopsided. You want to talk about why SMU was able to climb back in it in the second half? It's because Clemson as a team rushed for 64 yards on 32 attempts. SMU went for $154 on the ground. You go through and you look at what Georgia was able to do in the second half. And Texas's defense wanted nothing to do with Trevor Etienne. Nothing. Not a thing. You go through and you look at the Oregon-Penn State game. You want to know why Penn State was going to be in it so much? It's not because Drew Aller was playing lights out. He had 2 picks. He was sloppy in some areas, missed some easy throws, but they were 3 yards shy of rushing for 300 yards. Both Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton went for over 100 yards. So having the ability to run the football is what's going to win in this playoff.
Both teams, in my opinion, guys. I mean, Oregon had when Oregon was cruising, they were running the ball, and then that set up some of those play action shots over the middle. That they were able to hit the seams because all of a sudden Penn State had to start coming down. There's no doubt about it. The teams that played best yesterday absolutely were teams that could run the football. And the one team that was probably the most disappointing, like of all the games, Iowa State was very disappointing and Texas was very disappointing. Clemson and SMU, both those teams played their hearts out. Penn State and Oregon, both of those teams played their hearts out. Like neither one of those fan bases should come away from either one of those games feeling down about their football team. Neither one. Penn State shouldn't feel. I mean, Oregon's better than they are and showed that they're better than they are, but they kept fighting. They kept battling. Hats off to James Franklin in that moment. This is not a big game choke by James Franklin. He got beat by a better team. His kids never stopped.
I agree with that. That might be Franklin's best coaching job ever in a big game. To be perfectly honest with you,
they were ready for that game.
Yeah.
Vince, when they got down 28-10, they could have folded like a cheap suit, man.
Yep.
And they came right back.
Yep.
You got to give them a lot of credit for that, guys.
100%.
They did.
The other team I'm disappointed in, though, was Miami of Ohio.
Yeah.
Ohio just curb stomped them.
Yeah.
That was not great.
To your point, though, Georgia only ran for 141 yards. I'd be very curious to see what their rushing totals were in the second half.
Right.
But Texas ran 28 times for minus 31 yards. Even if you take out the quarterback sacks, they had 58 rushing yards on 22 carries. So you're not going to win big games like that, guys.
Yeah.
You're just not. You're not going to win big games like that. And that's kind of been Texas's MO in some of these big games is they just tries to say, hey, let me show how smart I am, and they're not able to get it done.
If I never see this graphic again, it'll be too soon, by the way. Just want to throw that out there. God.
I'm with you.
If anybody doesn't understand how this works by now, they're living under a rock.
Yeah. Yeah.
It appears as though they're going to start revealing, what's going to be happening here. We'll see.
Well, I'm watching it, and it's not ready. They're not going live yet. They are getting ready to start that, but they're not live yet. So, but yeah, so final predictions, guys. Where do you have Notre Dame? And
so I've got them ranked 5, but
Okay.
seeded 7.
Okay.
So that's where I've got them.
So as expected, guys, they do have Oregon number 1. So they're doing it that way.
Okay.
So they're doing they're releasing the 12. So Georgia is number 2.
Are these ranking or seeding?
These are the rankings.
Okay.
And then they're putting in the seeding kind of as they go. Those are expected. I expected Georgia to be number 2, and I mean this is their 4th big win of the season. I'm fine with Georgia being number 2, because it doesn't matter. They're going to be the 2 seed anyway, no matter what they did. So they just released those top 2, and now they're going back to talking again. So no surprises so far, guys. But Trev, real quick before we get there, what's your final prediction?
I had Notre Dame as a 7 seed.
Okay, and we all have them facing Indiana. I don't know if as the 7. I don't know that there's another opponent they could have, unless they jump one of Clemson or, like they leave maybe they leave SMU ahead of Indiana.
Yeah, something.
If they do that, then Notre Dame would get SMU, I believe, right?
Yeah, because then IU would be 11th and then face the 6th seed.
Right. Or they jump Clemson all the way in, or Arizona State all the way in to that number 10 spot. But I would imagine it's going to be Indiana. We'll find out for sure, though, kind of what they're going to do. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. So Boise State is at the number 9, guys. So where they were 9 last week, right?
No,
they were 10th.
They were 10th, so they moved up a spot. So it looks like SMU's at least going to fall down a spot, right? Yeah. And then Boise's the 3 seed based on what they just said.
I had Boise 9. I have SMU 10 in the rankings.
So
we'll see if that holds.
Real quick, so Boise State at 9, so that means Clemson and Arizona State are both going to be behind them since they're the 3 seed. So that means there's 1 spot left for either SMU or Alabama. Now there's the stuff that's leaking out. Brett McMurphy reported on it, and this says Alabama is going to be out. We'll see. Arizona State Sun Devils are the number 12 team, so they are.
That's what I got.
They are going to be the 4 seed. So that means Clemson is still out of the top 12, but they will then be the 12 seed.
They'll be the 12. Yeah.
Right. So Arizona State is in, and they are the 4 seed. So the 4 buys are Oregon, Georgia, Boise State, and Arizona State.
I think Clemson's going to be right behind them at 13.
I would imagine so.
That's what I think. I think they're just going to put them back to back, and then of course Clemson will get to 12.
Right. That would be my guess, Vince. I wonder if the committee just was feeling like we can't put 3 3-loss teams in, or 2 3-loss teams in.
Yeah.
We just can't.
Also, real quick, while we're waiting for the other one to come out, hats off to Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State.
Oh my gosh.
Being projected to finish last in the Big 12 to making the playoffs and getting a first round bye, regardless of how people think the outcome is going to be in that quarterfinal game, that's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Yep.
So is this gone the way you guys had thought it was going to go? 1, 2, 3,
4?
So far,
yeah. So far. And same with the rankings. I mean, I didn't expect Boise to move up, but a spot ahead of SMU is all I expected them to do. I had no illusions they were going to move ahead of Penn State or Texas.
No.
Clemson, Vince, is number 16.
Wow.
That's
they only moved up 1 spot for winning that game.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So they jumped ahead of Iowa State. That's it. So they beat the number 8 team in the country, and they only move up 1 spot. It doesn't matter. I mean,
it doesn't matter
be the 12 seed.
It doesn't matter at all. They're going to have a 12 next to their name for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Not a 16.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Arizona State had the far more convincing victory.
Yep.
Clemson beat the better team.
I think they got it right as far as who got the bye between Arizona State and Clemson. I think they got that part right. But I'm just surprised they were down as far as they are. Okay.
Agree. I mean, I think that when you look at the overall resume, it's still not good. They're still 1-3 against teams that are ranked.
Oh, I agree.
Texas is the 3 seed, is the third ranked team. So Texas will be the 5 seed.
There you go.
So I think what that's going to set up like we talked about. I won't say that tells me that I think they're going to leave Penn State ahead of Notre Dame also, but we'll see. It could be hey, look, they went to overtime against our number 2 team. But that sets up a Texas-Clemson matchup in the first round. So some couple colors of orange there.
Clemson hosting Texas. Texas hosting Clemson.
Texas will host Clemson. So Clemson will head down to Austin, Texas here for that matchup. So I'm very curious what order they're going to release these in now. So,
well, I think they're just going to go right down the list as far as their ranking. Because at this point, you're just
going to do like 6 and 11 next. Are you going to?
No, I think they're going to go
because they're
whoever's 4 and then 5. Because it's just
they did 1, 2, then they went 9, 12, then they did 16, then they did 3.
They did the buys, or they did the conference champions first.
Yeah,
and now they're just going to fill in the rankings. Is my guess.
Yeah, gonna be interesting. It's going to be interesting. So 2 former Penn State stayed ahead of Notre Dame, just like we talked about. So that will put Penn State as the 6th seed. We'll have a lot to say about that, but that'll put Notre Dame as the 7th seed. Apparently, we're not educated for thinking that this is exactly how it was going to be. Someone in the chat said that. It's pretty funny. Some people.
This is exactly the way we anticipated it was going to go.
Exactly.
We told you guys that was what was going to happen. Come on now. Come on.
Don't agree with it, but it's what we expected.
And I think what we figured.
I think this does lock in SMU to the spot. Because I don't see how you can leave these teams in place where you have them and then drop SMU. So I do think the leak that came out about Alabama out, I do think that's going to be how it plays out. Because that's what I said at the beginning. If they leave SMU in, Notre Dame will fall to 7, right? And it's confirmed Notre Dame is the 7 seed. They will host, obviously, as the 7 seed, and they will face the winner of that game. Whoever they play will face Georgia.
Yep, probably in Atlanta, by the way. That's my
most
guess.
Likely. Yeah, most likely.
With the way that they're going to hand
the
out
Sugar Bowl, because they're gonna make the path for
Oregon
as easy as possible because they're the 2 seed.
It's going to be they get to pick.
Right.
The buys get to.
Do
pick.
they get to pick?
Yeah, and
I thought
it goes.
The playoff teams got the bowl games got to pick. I thought
it's conference affiliation, and then it's also preference of the teams that get the buy.
Gotcha.
So Oregon's going to choose the Rose Bowl, guaranteed, and then Georgia's going to choose Atlanta, right? And then I personally think that Boise State's going to choose the Fiesta because it's going to be between the Fiesta and the Peach. And they're not going to want to have Arizona State in the Fiesta. They're going to push Arizona State to the Peach.
I think so.
That's what I think is going to happen.
Ohio State is number 6, so the Buckeyes will be the number 8 seed. So I had a friend of mine who said he thought they were going to move them around to try to avoid second-round rematches, and that is clearly not what they did. So they're going to have a potential – if Ohio State's able to beat what I think will be Tennessee, who I think will be next on there. I think Tennessee will be number 7. That is going to then set a potential rematch if Ohio State can beat Tennessee, which is not going to be easy in the second round between Oregon and Ohio State. So Penn State and Texas have really nice paths to the semifinals now because they have Boise State and Arizona State.
We believe Tennessee is going to be 7, right?
I think so, yeah. Again, it doesn't look like they're going to drop any of that. I mean, you've got Tennessee and Indy. I mean, 6 is Ohio State, 9's Boise. There's 2 spots in between. Yeah. They said they're not going to move the teams that didn't play, so it's going to be Tennessee and Indiana, which is going to set up a 7 versus 10 Notre Dame matchup. So Tennessee is number 7. This is exactly kind of how we thought it was going to go, guys. Indiana Hoosiers are going to end up being number 8, and that will put them in the 11 seed, which means Notre Dame will play Indiana in the first round. So they're going to put 2 northern teams together. And then that's going to set up potentially an SMU Penn State matchup, a 6-11 Penn State SMU matchup.
Yeah.
Is how I think this thing is going to play out. So you're going to have SMU is most likely going to be the number 10 ranked team. And you're going to then have Alabama at 11 is what I think is going to happen, which would then knock Alabama out because Clemson would bump them out of the playoff.
Correct. So
no 9-3 teams in the playoff the first year.
Yep. Alabama will be the first team out. Miami will be the second team out.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because then Miami will be 13, right?
Should
based on what they did last week. They're not going to bump Ole Miss or South Carolina ahead of them.
No, because they're all idle. They're all
and
idle.
that's what Ward Manuel said, that the teams that didn't play aren't going to move around each other.
Right.
They'll move them within the teams that played, but they're not going to like jump a team that didn't play ahead of a team that didn't play, or vice versa.
Yep.
So that's kind of how it is. So you're going to have Ole Miss at 14 based on what he was saying. You're going to have South Carolina at 15. And I'm curious kind of where Iowa State falls in this conversation as well. So I would imagine so it's official. Indiana is the number 8 team. They will be the 10th seeded team, which means they will play Notre Dame in the first round. I'm not a huge fan of that matchup because I think it's lazy, in my opinion, to be completely honest with you. But hey, that we expected that from the committee. But we'll talk more about that next, guys. So now we get down to it. And I'm curious how long they're going to play this up. Is it going to be Boise State or is it going to be Alabama? So I agree with Irish Eyes. They need to bump this committee. This is a bad committee.
Yeah.
It's a very bad committee. I've been Vince, I've been a big defender of past committees and the jobs they've done. I think this committee did a piss poor job with the rankings the entire time. But
at least they were consistently bad because we knew exactly what was going to happen today.
Well, just because we assumed that they were going to, because we know the teams that they are hyping up despite their resumes not deserving to be hyped.
Yeah.
So
we knew exactly what they were going to do.
Yep. But they were consistently bad because they inconsistently applied the data, and you could figure out how they were going to inconsistently apply the data. That was the disappointing thing. So it's going to be a battle for the Hoosier State, Vince.
Hey, I'm okay with it.
Playoff.
I mean, I know we're going to probably get into it a little bit deeper today in this show, and then, of course, over the next couple of weeks. But somebody in the chat said this is the toughest road of any team to play for Notre Dame. Like Notre Dame has the toughest road to get to the championship. I disagree. I actually have zero problem with this path. Zero.
Well, I will say it's the second toughest. I mean, I do think it's a tougher path. It doesn't mean that they can't do it. I mean, because Ohio State's going to play Oregon and Tennessee. I think that's a tougher path than what Notre Dame has to go through.
Ohio State and Tennessee is a tough game, and then they're going to have Oregon. That's the hardest by far.
Texas plays SMU is in. It's official. SMU is in, and Alabama's out.
Okay.
So Penn State, SMU, but Penn State plays SMU and Boise State. That's an easier path than Notre Dame's. And Texas plays an easier path. I mean, but that's how it should be. The higher seeded you are, the easier path you should have. Yep. That's to be expected. So I think the tough paths are exactly how the seeding is. The 5 team has the easiest path. The 6 seed has the next easiest path. The 7 seed has the second toughest path. And the 8, 9 seeds have the toughest path. I think that's exactly how the seeding is meant to be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't have a problem with Notre Dame having the tougher path than the 5 and the 6. That's how it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? If Notre Dame was the 5 seed and they had a tougher path than the 7 seed, we'd all be pissed off. Right? I mean,
that's true.
You know what I mean? So it's like the whole point of being seated higher is you're supposed to get an easier path to this. So guys, they have the playoff set. You have number 1 Oregon, number 2 Georgia, number 3 seed Boise State, number 4 seed Arizona State all get byes. Then you have the number 5 Texas plays number 12 Clemson, number 6 Penn State plays number 11 SMU, number 7 Notre Dame plays number 10 Indiana, and then number 8 Ohio State plays number 9 Tennessee. Vince, let's start with you. What's your initial reaction to the? Let's start with the overall bracket. Right? Is that what I had in the thing? We'll start with just the overall thoughts on the bracket, then we'll get into more Notre Dame specific.
Yeah, the overall bracket, again, this is exactly what we all thought it was going to be, so I'm not in any way surprised by anything that the committee did. This is exactly what I anticipated. I think some of these first-round matchups are intriguing. I think it's fascinating that Arizona State and Boise State are getting a first-round bye. I don't think anybody would have predicted that being the case going into the season, and even probably halfway through the season, people probably wouldn't have anticipated that. And the ACC champ is on the outside looking in as far as a bye. I think that's fascinating all by itself, but then you've got the ACC. I mean, Clemson kind of backed in, a great win obviously yesterday, but they kind of backed into this thing. So there are much easier paths to this thing than I thought that there would be as I was looking at what the potential bracket could be at the beginning of the year, right? you think of like the top 12 teams, you think, man, there's going to be some really, really good matchups in the first round and in the second round, et cetera. And I think that you're staring in the face at some potential blowouts, to be perfectly honest with you. Now, I'm going to have to dive in a little bit more, but and by blowout, I mean by like 2 scores, like two, maybe a 3-score game, like that kind of a thing. Not like a 1AA versus a power 4, like that kind of a thing. I'm talking about when you are looking at playoff football, you want every game to be close. You want every game to be competitive. I don't know that that's going to be the case. I think that there's some teams that may just be happy being here. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I just think that's a possibility. And I think it's also a possibility that there are going to be some teams that these are going to be the best teams that they've faced all season, and it might be a bit of a wake-up call.
Yeah.
So that's the route that my initial thoughts are going into this thing, and then I've got plenty of thoughts about Notre Dame's path too. But
we'll get into that, But just Trev, what are your overall thoughts on this bracket?
Initially, I'm happy that the committee stuck with their guns because I know there's going to be a lot of heat on the committee throughout the show, rightfully so. But I'm happy that they made the decision to drop out Bama and put in SMU because they stuck to their guns of we're not going to penalize a team regardless of the outcome of their conference championship if they make it. So I know we've had a lot of discussion around teams deserving to get in and what that looks like. And SMU was the more deserving team. They almost went back in and corrected the mistake of dropping Miami below Alabama in the week previous. So, I mean, in the first round matchup, I think you have, some interesting ones. I think Tennessee, Ohio State might be a little bit more interesting than what some people are going to give it credit for based on matchups there. IU, Notre Dame, I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to talk about for the state of Indiana. But, Brian, I'm with you. I think it's a little lazy, a little bit, like just to have that be the matchup. But I know we're going to dive into that a little later. To Vince's point, where I think some of the lopsided matchups might come in is the 5, 12, 6, and 11. But like the way playoff brackets are set up, in theory, that's what it's supposed to be anyways. So going to be interested to see what happens. I mean, you have an SMU team where the lights were a little bit too bright in the ACC championship game, but now they've gotten a taste of what that looks like. And despite the lights being too bright, they still gave themselves an opportunity to win at the end. So what's that going to look like when they go and play in Happy Valley? I have no idea. And then for Clemson, Texas, what I've said and what I've told people all throughout when we talk about the playoffs is the beauty of a 12-team playoff like this is every team is going to have the opportunity to go through and prove if they belong or prove people right or prove people wrong. And both teams have that opportunity right now. I mean, I'm throwing Texas in there as well because Texas's good wins aren't as glaring on paper as some of the other ones, right? You have to go.
They literally have 0 top 25 wins.
Yep.
At least Penn State and Notre Dame can say they have 1.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. And that's that was my point is with Texas, you have to look, it's like, well, they destroyed a Michigan team who ended up beating an Ohio State team, and they beat Florida better than anybody else in the SEC. And like, that's what I mean by for Texas, it's not as, oh, these are their good wins. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
and their best win was over Notre Dame's second best win.
Yep. Agreed.
Maybe third best win.
So interested to, I'm excited to get into the topic of discussion, but I'm kind of sticking with what I've said for the last couple of weeks is I'm now happy that we can talk about what the formatted playoff is going to be. There's no more speculation around who's going to be seated where. So I'm excited to dive into it with you today, guys.
My overall reaction, guys, is I'm not surprised, but I think it's not good. They were at least consistent. See, here's the thing, and this is what I said. I feel like they were trapped. They couldn't leave Penn State and Texas where they were, and it's very clear this committee loves Texas and Penn State. They couldn't leave them where they are and then drop SMU out. I think they knew that it would have been a PR nightmare, and when you and PR nightmares are what led to the BCS being formed and the old voting system being out. It also is what led to the BCS being done away with because it just constantly created these PR nightmares. They're already going to have a PR nightmare to a degree, no matter what, because that's just how rankings go. Somebody's going to be pissed that they didn't make it. But if you start applying after what they did to Florida State last year, there was no way they were going to be able to drop SMU out of a 12-team playoff this year and still leave those teams where they were. So if they were going to drop SMU out, they were going to be forced to put Notre Dame in at 5, and I don't think they wanted to do that. I don't think that they had any desire to put Notre Dame ahead of Penn State or Texas. And to me, it's just kind of like it makes these conference championship games a little bit irrelevant. It's almost to the point now where you might as well just put the 2 teams in the conference championships, just put them in. If you qualify for conference championship, you're going to get in. You know what I mean? It's just like, so the whole thing is very frustrating. It's not surprising though. I mean, they have been, Vince, you nailed it. You know, I mean, they were consistently bad the entire time.
Yeah, they were consistent. Like it's like when I was a head coach for baseball, right? And you know, you get a bad umpire. Well, at least he's consistent. He's consistently bad. Like at least you know what you're going to get. Yeah. Like, and that's how I feel about this committee. Yeah. Like they were consistently bad every single week, all the way through. So at least we knew what we were going to get. I don't, you know, it's not great. It's not. You know, I'm sure Alabama fans are pissed, and I'm sure that there's Miami fans are probably upset, and you know,
and Notre Dame fans are pissed,
and Notre Dame fans are upset. I get it. I totally get it, man. Everybody was hoping that they'd see, you know, Notre Dame, Alabama, and Notre Dame Stadium. Like, I get it, man.
But, or Notre Dame, Clemson, or exactly.
But you know, here, I guess I've gotten to the point in my age where I'm just like, look, here's the path. Let's just go do it, man. Like that's how I feel. You can't be king of the homecoming court unless you're on the court to begin with, man. And now you're in the court. Go take care of your business. Like if you would have told me, I'll say this, and before we get into the deep stuff about Notre Dame, if you, as a Notre Dame fan, if you'd have told me Notre Dame was going to be hosting IU at the beginning of the season, I would have been like, let's go. Like I would have been fine with that, you know? So look, Notre Dame's in after a horrible loss to NIU. A horrible loss, and they're hosting a playoff game. The path's right there for you. So, again, the committee, they're terrible. It's bad. It's really bad all year long. They put way too much stock in the SEC and the Big Ten, which we kind of knew was probably going to be the case. But specific teams within those 2 conferences, I'm sure you're going to get all kinds of backlash because there's only 3 SEC teams in the playoff. And they pretty much figured they were guaranteed to get 4. Same with the Big Ten, but they did get the 4. And so, there's going to be people upset, but at the same time, they didn't take care of their business. So here we are.
I mean, that's a key point, Vince, is if you beat Northern Illinois, we're not having this conversation, right? Yeah. But I also don't know that they would have gone 12-0 if they'd have beat Northern Illinois.
That's also very fair.
Is I'm willing to accept this path. Because as I've watched this team develop, I really do believe that Northern Illinois is what really made this team grow up in a hurry and made this team who they are. And here's the thing, guys, is like, listen, you were going to have to beat Georgia at some point in time anyway. You were probably going to have to play Georgia. Like, here's the thing. If Notre Dame would have been the 6 seed or the 5 seed, that most likely they would have played. Like, if they were the 5 seed, they weren't going to play Georgia till the championship game. Correct?
Yeah.
Well, where's that being played?
In Atlanta.
In Atlanta. You were going to have to play Georgia and Atlanta anyway, folks. So bring it. I mean, if you're a team that's going to win a championship, do it now. You know, do it in week 2. But first, you got to get past Indiana, right? I mean,
you're going to be playing Georgia and Atlanta anyway, so it's all good.
You're either going to play Georgia and Atlanta in the second round in the quarters. You're going to play Georgia and Atlanta in the championship game.
Right.
You know, so to me, it's like, I'm not worried about, we'll talk about Notre Dame's path, but I'm not worried about the path. The path is the second hardest path of anyone in the playoff, but that's exactly of the hosting teams. But that's what seeding is supposed to do. The 5 seed's supposed to have the easiest path of the teams that don't get a bye. 6 is supposed to have the next easiest. 7, the next easiest, and 8 is supposed to have the hardest. That's the whole point of seeding. So I don't have an issue with their based on where they're ranked, they should have a tougher path. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Because here's the thing. If Notre Dame is good enough to compete for a championship, then they'll be able to beat Georgia. If they're not, then we'll find out. And now Notre Dame can go back to the drawing board and say, okay, where are we not good enough? Let's go figure it out. Let's recruit to get better. And you're going to find that out in the quarterfinals. You're going to find that out in the championship game, assuming you can even get there. You know, and so that's kind of the way I look at it, guys, is that, look, I have not been overly concerned with their seeding. my problem has been the process. And this is what I said about the Miami-Alabama thing last week. I'd rather play Alabama for Notre Dame. I think that's a better matchup for Notre Dame. Because, again, it's about matchups. I think that Indiana is a better matchup for Notre Dame than SMU is, who also likes to throw the ball all over the field and has a pretty scrappy defense, but they have a quarterback that can run. Indiana has a quarterback that just sits back in the pocket. This path is okay for me. What bothered me about it, guys, was the process. The way they got here, to me, is the bad part about how this ranking. Notre Dame should have been the 5 seed. I don't care that they're the 7 seed, but they should have been the 5 or the 6 seed based on what they say their criteria is. And so, if you're going to sit there and say, well, yeah, Notre Dame could handle their business, true, but one game shouldn't trump the other 11. And in the other 11 games, Notre Dame was a better team than Texas, and they were a better team than Penn State. And that's what it boils down to for me. But it is what it is. Right. But Notre Dame's not the only team that I felt had that misapplied data too. And so that's kind of, this isn't just an anti-Notre Dame thing. I think there were other teams that weren't fairly evaluated. I've talked about Miami. You say, well, Miami, it doesn't have any good wins. Well, neither does Texas. And they're the 3rd ranked team, and Miami's the 13th ranked team. So what about Texas should have them ahead of Miami? Well, Miami had some ugly wins over Virginia Tech and Cal. You mean like Texas's ugly win over Vanderbilt? Like their ugly win over Arkansas? Like every team has those. Penn State's ugly win over Minnesota, who went 7-5. So those things, guys, this has been applied to multiple teams. This was a pro SEC, pro Big Ten biased committee, especially the Big Ten. And I think that's more my issue. But as far as how it affects Notre Dame, I'm good with it, guys. I've said all along, I don't want an easy path to the play, the easiest path possible to the playoff. Because if Notre Dame would have beat Clemson, a 3-loss Clemson team in round 1 as the 5, and then gone and beat Arizona State, or beat an 11 SMU in the first round, and beat a number 3 seed Boise State in the second round, all we would hear for the next 3 weeks is, this is just same old Notre Dame. They don't have to play anybody. Wait till the semis. Well, now if Notre Dame gets to the semifinals, we're going to know that this team belongs. And that's where I'm at.
Oh, well. Oh, they beat IU, who's an upstart team. They beat Georgia with a backup quarterback. Well, I've got the excuses for you.
I mean, but they're going to be easier to just be like, okay, now you're just being stupid, right? I mean, you know what I mean?
I agree with you,
because
but the excuses will be
there. But they won't. And here's why they won't, Vince, because they will have spent the 10 days before talking about how Notre Dame just doesn't match up at all with Georgia, and how Georgia's even better now with their backup quarterback. And you know what I mean? And then when they flip the script, if Notre Dame wins that game, and they got to beat Indiana first, but we're just kind of having a big picture discussion,
sure,
then they'll lose even more credibility. But I actually think Notre Dame beating Georgia would be the thing that wakes up the national media to this team's really good. I do. I actually do think if Notre Dame beats Georgia, the narrative will change.
Okay.
And here's why. Why you've got Notre Dame in the semifinals now, ESPN. It's in your best interest to be like, hey, guys, we're going to now ride this train as long as it's going to take. And we saw that in 2012. Once they realized Notre Dame was going to be in, they rode that train and hyped Notre Dame up until they got blasted by Alabama. And so now what they could do, Vince, is lay the groundwork for the excuses before that game, sure, if Carson Beck can't play. But it won't really matter to me.
They just announced the
Notre Dame will be playing on Friday night,
just like we thought. Yeah. Friday night, and then they also have the location. So Oregon's in the Rose Bowl, Georgia's in the Sugar Bowl.
Whoa,
Boise,
that's in New Orleans.
What's that? Yeah, Boise's in the Fiesta. And wow. Arizona State is in the Peach Bowl, just like I said it was going to be. Because Boise State,
you said Peach Bowl for Georgia.
No, I didn't.
I thought you said Peach Bowl.
No, I got
Atlanta. I thought you said Atlanta.
I got Peach for Arizona State.
Oh, I thought you said that they'd be in Atlanta
because they got to go Sugar.
Want to be
because they have Sugar. Because the Sugar Bowl tie-in.
Got it.
That trumps the other. And then Boise State. the closest one for them is the Fiesta Bowl, and they don't want Arizona State to be in the Fiesta Bowl, so they're going to push them.
I misheard
beach.
you, Vince.
Yeah.
I thought you said they were going to be in Atlanta, so I misheard you. So yeah, that's interesting. That's going to be in New Orleans. Very interesting.
That's an interesting tie. So Notre Dame's path now is Sugar Bowl if they can beat IU. So South Bend, then the Sugar Bowl. And then I don't know how they delineate who.
Cotton and orange.
It's cotton and orange, but I don't know how they delineate who goes where. So
yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to assume that especially if Notre Dame wins, and because it'd be Notre Dame versus either Penn State or SMU, and then the other bracket could be, Texas Clemson winner against the Oregon, Ohio State, Tennessee winner. So that's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. But yeah, I just assumed it was going to be the Peach Bowl events. I didn't even think about the bowl tie-ins. So very, very good observation on your part on that one. So guys, that's our overall feel. Let's dive specifically into, we talked about how we feel about where Notre Dame is ranked. None of us thought that they should be 7, but we all assumed it was going to be 7, right? So we can kind of move past that. Let's talk about this matchup. Number 7 Notre Dame, number 7 seed Notre, and I'm not going to be like number 5 Notre Dame, but they're the 7. Okay, that's 7. What we're going with for the rest of the way.
It is what it
number
is.
7 Notre Dame versus number 10 Indiana in round 1. Let's talk about it, Trev, and because I know Trev's got some very strong feelings on Indiana as a football team. So let's start with you, my man.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Indiana did this year was more deserving to get them into the playoffs. It was like there's no doubt about it. But the thing that I saw when IU played Ohio State was the major gap in athleticism with them. And that's not a knock on that. That doesn't mean they're bad. That doesn't mean that they suck. It's just there's a gap. There is a gap between IU, a perennial below 500 football program, and Ohio State, a team that should be competing for a national championship every year. And when I look at the Notre Dame IU matchup, again, like I said, I think the matchup itself is kind of lazy on the side of the committee, but that's a given. But when I look at what this means for Notre Dame as a whole, there's going to be a lot of opportunity to silence a lot of the things that people talk about. Notre Dame's not in a conference. Okay, well, what happens if they go beat your coveted Cinderella story in the first round? You know what I mean? Like what happens then? Notre Dame couldn't even beat the middle tier teams in the Big Ten. It's like, okay, well, they just beat IU, a team that everybody was high on. Now, mind you, to Vince's point, everybody will be high on IU if they lose to Notre Dame. But overall, the thing that I love about the playoffs, and I'm going to stay very consistent with this, is it's an opportunity for each team to go kind of prove it. And that's the way that I look at this IU Notre Dame game. Because IU has the opportunity to go prove people like me wrong, who thinks that they don't have the athletes to compete. They don't have the same skill level if you're going to match up the teams with what it looks like. I don't think IU has the size. I don't think they have the athleticism. They could prove me wrong. For a lot of other people that are doubting Notre Dame, it's, well, I'm not willing to look at the fact that in their 10-game win streak, they average 44 points a game. And I'm not willing to look at the fact that they beat their opponents by an average margin of victory by 30.7. We just think it's Notre Dame and they don't play in a conference and it doesn't mean anything. So for people that doubt Notre Dame has the opportunity to go out. It's like, hey, we made the playoffs. We're here. One, deal with it because they were going to get in. Hate to say it, like to the people that doubt them. But really, it was clear once Notre Dame started going on their run and was able to avoid the chaos that was happening to the rest of college football in middle of October to basically throughout the rest of the season. While all these other teams were losing, Notre Dame was winning by 30. If you hate it, you hate it. But those are the facts. You want something to Google. But if Notre Dame wants to go and prove people wrong and prove people that they belong, it's to go out and beat a good quality IU team. The thing that I want people to understand of my take with IU, I don't think they're bad. I just think that there's a gap.
Mm-hmm.
IU is a good football. You don't go 11-1 if you suck. You know what I mean? And you're looking at, well, their only losses to Ohio State in Columbus. I mean, it's a good loss, So I think overall, before we dive into it and, matchups on either side of the football, which I know there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out from Irish Breakdown over the next couple of weeks on what that's going to look like until their Friday night game. But overall, I like it from the narrative of it's a prove it game for each team. IU has the opportunity to prove that they belong, and Notre Dame has the opportunity to also, in the same light, kind of be like, hey, guys, like, you might not like it. We're here, and we just beat, the number, what would that be, 8 team in the country, the number 10 seed in the playoffs. So as much as you don't like it, we're on to the Sugar Bowl to play Georgia. So
here, I got a couple of lines of thinking here as I try to, I've started thinking about this last night. And, there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to IU. First of all, I'm going to really enjoy hearing Curt Cignetti just pop off at the mouth over the next 2 weeks, because that's guaranteed to happen, because it was already happening this past weekend when he was talking about margin of victory and all of those different things. I just wanted to be like,
Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois.
Oh yeah, like he's doing his thing. That's who he is, and that's what he does. That's great. But then don't be upset when they score on you at the last second. But anyway, so I'm excited for that. I'm excited for the fact that, as Trevor so aptly pointed out, when watching IU play Ohio State, I saw Curtis Rourke go 8 for 18 for 68 yards and get sacked 5 times. That is a stat that I'm going to hold on to for the next 2 weeks, because I think that Al Golden can do that to Curtis Rourke. Okay. Ohio State's defense is very similar to Notre Dame's defense. And I think that you give Al Golden 3 weeks now, 2 weeks now that he knows who it is, to get ready for a game plan defensively against IU's offense. I like where Notre Dame is going to be at from a matchup standpoint. I like it. For all the people out there that are upset that it's not a Southern team coming up to Notre Dame and all of these different things, look, I was excited for that possibility as well. But if you're hosting a college playoff football game and you are going to give the excuse of weather for why you lost, because it's going to be another cold weather team that comes up here and you don't have the advantage anymore, then you didn't belong in the first place. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie to
it. I did want to see those Southern kids freezing. That'd have been a fun aesthetic, but
yes,
but it also would have been something people would have used as an excuse for why they lost the game.
100%. And look, here's the other thing. If you really want to dig deep into this whole weather thing, a good amount of IU's roster is from James Madison, JMU, from your home state of Virginia. That's not exactly a northern area, right? Like, okay, so I don't buy the whole, like, it's IU. They're used to the cold and all these different things. Look, Curtis Rourke's from Canada. He's used to the cold. But other than that, like, whatever, man. They got to come up to Notre Dame. There's gonna be more red in the stadium than anybody wants, because that's just what's going to happen. But it's not going to matter. I'm sorry. I don't think it's going to matter. That's where I'm at with this.
You can tell who was born and raised in Indiana and who wasn't, because I actually think this is a really good football team. Because I don't have grew up my whole life where they sucked and all this other kind of stuff, and it's a basketball school and all that. Like, look, Notre Dame should win this football game. They're a better football team, but this is a good football team. And this is going to be a game that Notre Dame is going to have to earn. And yes, I know that the Ohio State game, but guys, that's one game. Just like Michigan's not a better team on the season because they beat Ohio State, right? I mean, that was a great game for Ohio State. It was a bad game for Indiana. It was a game in which I think Ohio State has a more built-in pass rush than Notre Dame does with their edge, and that created a lot of problems. They brought a lot of pressures, and I think Notre Dame can replicate a lot of that. I think Notre Dame can give them a lot of the same problems that Ohio State did, but I think this is a really good football team. I do. And Notre Dame is going to have to prove themselves against this team. I mean, listen, the week after they got beat by Ohio State, they beat Purdue 66-0. Notre Dame had previously set the all-time worst blowout win over Purdue, and then Indiana beat it. This is a team that absolutely smashed Michigan State. You say, well, they lost to them, and then they lost to – but they beat Michigan, and Michigan beat Ohio State, and all we do all that stuff. But this is a team that literally has, of their 11 wins, one of them was by single digits. That sounds a lot like Notre Dame's, right? I mean, neither of these teams are perfect, but I think this Indiana team is a good football team. Do I think Notre Dame is better? Absolutely. But as you said, Trev, this team didn't get here by accident. They didn't back their way in with 3 losses and just had an easy conference schedule and had 3 losses and had to go in and and win the way Clemson did, they earned their way in my opinion, with wins. Because you could say, well, yeah, their schedule is soft. Well, they beat Michigan, which is something that Ohio State couldn't do, right? Because we'd be having a whole different conversation today if Ohio State would have beat Michigan. I'd be very curious what the rankings and seedings would have looked like then, because Notre Dame might have been the 8 in that situation, because Ohio State would have been ahead of them and Penn State would have probably stayed ahead of them. So it would have been a very interesting situation. But this is a good football team, right? And I know how it's going to go. Every Notre Dame fan is going to expect them to blow them out, and if they only win by touchdown, it's going to be, oh, they suck. Guys, this is a good football team. This is a good football team, and it's going to be a great matchup. And what I love is it sets up a lot of cool storylines for me. It does. It's two teams from the same state, haven't played each other since 1991. Before that, I thought I saw that the previous matchup between the two teams, guys, was, I think, 1959. Notre Dame has a 23-5-1 all-time advantage over Indiana. Indiana started it off actually with a 4-3-1 record. Yeah, so prior to the 1991 game, fellas, they hadn't played since 1958. Notre Dame had won 20 of their last 21 meetings. Indiana actually started off. Indiana dominated Notre Dame in the 1800s, fellas. They were 2-1 against Notre Dame in the 1800s. But in all seriousness, this is not your daddy's Indiana football team. This is a good football team. This wasn't a fluky season. And this is what the portal can do if you hire the right coach. Like you said, Vince, he brought a lot of those JMU kids with him. Well, if you're from Virginia, you know that if you're from JMU, you've played in the snow before. It snows up in the mountains of Virginia, and James Madison is up in that area. And B, they've played against North Dakota State and South Dakota State and some of those teams where it's been cold weather. I think North Dakota State's in a bowl, but they've played in the snow. Trust me, these kids are not it's not going to be uncommon to them. But my whole thing is, good, get rid of any potential excuse the team that they're going to play has. Like to Vince's kind of what you were saying, right? Get rid of any excuse that any team could have. Well, it was cold, it was this, it was travel. No excuses. You don't have to travel very far. You don't have to deal with the cold. It's going to be cold. You're going to be able to, because like, here's the thing is like, well, this kid's from here and that kid's from there. The reality is those kids from Indiana who aren't from the North are just as acclimated to the cold as the Notre Dame kids who aren't from the North. So no excuses about this, that, or the other thing. It's going to be about who's the better football team. Which team can best prepare their football team for this game? Which team can best execute their game plan? And now that this matchup is the way that it is, I am very thrilled that Notre Dame had the game they had against USC.
Mm-hmm.
Because Notre Dame got they weren't exposed, but they had, like we said, but there's some film now says, guys, if we don't do what we're supposed to do, we can give up these kind of plays. And Indiana is going to do very similar things to us that USC did. And they're going to have some receivers that can create some issues. So it's going to force Notre Dame to be ready and be ready to play. And if some of you think that Notre Dame's just like, could Notre Dame blow Indiana out? Of course they can. Could Notre Dame lose this game? Of course they can. Some of you that are going to spend these next 2 weeks convincing yourselves this is just going to be a blowout are going to be in for a rude awakening if you actually start watching film of Indiana like I have. This is a good football team. We're going to have fun these next 2 weeks breaking this game down. And the reason I'm saying that is because I get so sick of Notre Dame fans spending all their time telling every week you convince yourselves that the opponent sucks, and then you want to complain about their seeding at the end of the year because their schedule gets no respect. Maybe they were looking at our message boards and our chats and listening to you all tell every week how the opponent sucks, right? I mean, so this is not a bad football team. This is a good football team. Notre Dame is a better football team, and they need to go show it. But if they win this football game, it will be an earned win over a good football team. So don't fall in the national narrative of talking down Notre Dame's opponent so they can then take credit away from Notre Dame if they win. This is a good football team. Notre Dame's going to have to earn this victory, and I can't wait to break it down because Cignetti has done a phenomenal job with this team, and this is a talented football team because they were, Vince, able to completely overhaul their roster through the portal.
Correct. So right now, from what the transfer portal is a fairly new thing, and I don't want to go too far into this. We've seen teams look really good for 1 year using the transfer portal as a primary way of building your roster. Can Curt Cignetti do that next year? Can he do it the following year?
No
That's
clue.
the biggest question.
No clue.
Right. But that
Right.
doesn't matter for this
Doesn't
game.
matter for this game.
I'm just talking about in the future. Yeah, he's done a great job in year one. We've seen plenty of times that teams look great in year one of a rebuild using the transfer portal. I personally don't think it's sustainable. But again, it doesn't matter for this game. It doesn't matter at all. So, and look, I'm not going to listen to people that say that I use a terrible football team because they're in the college football playoff.
Right.
There are no terrible football teams in the college football playoff. Right. They're all good teams because
even Clemson,
even if they backdoored,
good,
yeah, right. No,
I was still a pretty good team. Sorry.
Look, even if you backdoored yourself into the playoff, you won a conference championship.
You went 10-3, right?
Like you're a double-digit win team. You beat a team to get in. Like nobody is given gifts here. Is the point that I'm making? They're all good, solid teams, and so any win in the college football playoff is a good win. Period. And so, look, Notre Dame's got to win 4 games. I don't mind their path. I don't, because I do think it is going to shut some people up at some point. I do. And that's what they need to do. Look, if you want to be taken seriously by the national media, by, whoever you think you need to be taken seriously by, you need to take care of business at home. And then you need to go on the road into a hostile environment, because it's going to be like being on the road against Georgia. It will be, and beating them being more physical, right? Having better athletes on the edge, like all of those things that everybody has said that Notre Dame isn't. You get to prove in an indoor stadium, right, that you are that team against a perennially really, really elite program like Georgia in SEC country. You can go prove that. You've got the best thing to me is the way that this thing sets up perfectly for Notre Dame if they can do what they should do.
Yep.
I think that's great.
Yep.
Look, did I want an easier path? Yeah, of course I did. I want Notre Dame to win a national championship, and I could give a crap how they do it. But if this is going to be the path, awesome, because it's going to check up some other boxes along the way too. So
yeah,
I have no problem with their path because we're still talking about the Notre Dame side of things. If they do what they're supposed to do to IU and win, then they get Georgia. I think they win that. I think they should win that game. Then you're going to get one of 3 teams: Boise State, SMU, or Penn State.
Right.
How do you feel about that,
right,
folks? Like that's a Final Four game against one of those 3 teams. And if you win that game, you probably got Oregon,
Ohio State, Tennessee, or Texas. You're going to get one of those 4, right?
And those are all blue bloods,
and if
folks.
you're good enough to beat Georgia, then you go beat Georgia in second round, and you get your praise. If you don't beat Georgia, then you know where you are as a program, and now it's time to go get better. I mean, that's what the postseason is. It's your path to a championship, and your path to say, hey, listen, where are we as a program, right? If you're looking at it from like where Marcus Freeman and his staff are looking at it, right? Because we're not in the program, and we're not doing anything to do that. But this is what the opportunity for them is to here's who we are as a program, right? We went against Georgia, and even if you beat Georgia, you say, hey, listen, we got to get better here because this is where they gave us some problems, right? Or we lost the game, we got to get better here. You want those kind of measuring sticks, fellas, because sometimes you can get into fool's gold. I've used this example before about Michigan's run to the national championship game. Was it about 5-6 years ago? Actually, probably longer than that now. When they made it was John Beilein's second national title run, and they got to the Final Four, and it was I think the highest seeded team they played until the championship game was like the 7 seed, because there was a bunch of upsets in their bracket, and they were. I'm actually going to look at it now. They played the number 14 team in round 1. They played the 6 seed in round 2. They played the 7 seed in the Sweet 16, the 9 seed in the Elite 8. They played the 11 seed Loyola Chicago in the Final 4. And then they went to the championship game and finally played a good team and got blasted. Right? I mean, you want to find out who you are, and the only way you can find out truly who you are is by playing the best. There's a chance Notre Dame's going to have to beat, if they want to win a title, they're going to have to beat Georgia, Penn State, potentially, and either Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, or Tennessee. That's what you want. How good are you really? And that's what I love. I mean, last time Notre Dame won a championship, they had to beat they beat 3 of the top 5 teams in the country in the postseason rankings. They beat, I think it was number 2, number 4, number 5, and number 7, I believe. Let me go look that up for sure, guys. But that's what you want to be. That's how legends are made, right? It's not by, easy paths to the playoff. Like, I think Georgia's second national title doesn't get the respect it deserves because everybody just assumes that TCU is this bad football team. TCU beat like I heard some moron on ESPN say the other day, well, like, we can't have these teams getting in because then we're going to have another TCU Georgia. I'm like, do you guys remember that TCU actually beat someone in the semifinals to play Georgia? It wasn't like TCU got put in the semifinals and got blasted by Georgia. They beat Michigan to get to the championship game. And then Georgia handled them, right? But it's like you want to have that chance to go out there and prove that you're the best team in the country. And I'm looking at it now, guys. The 1988 season, Notre Dame final rankings beat number 2 Miami, beat number 5 or number 4 Michigan, beat number 5 West Virginia, and beat number 7 USC to win a championship. Couple of those games were on the road or neutral field. So if you want to be a champion, you got to go play the best teams. And that's what's in front of Notre Dame. There's not going to be any bull crap. Oh, well, you played, you got, SMU in round 1 and you got Boise State in round 2 and Tennessee pulled off a couple upsets. They weren't even the 3rd best team in the SEC. You know what I mean? You're going to get all those excuses. Now you don't. You're going to find out who you are or not. But for right now, it's about, you got to worry about Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be the key.
So speaking of that game, weather.com, it's going to be 24 degrees with a 15% chance of snow.
You know what my thoughts are on that?
Just go.
You know what my thoughts are on that, Vince?
What's that?
I'm fired up that I'm in the press box for that.
You dang right. There's not going to be layers here.
My poor, beautiful wife is going to be on the sideline taking photos in 24-degree weather.
Yeah,
she might take a hamstring injury before
she's going to be hyped, though. The blood's going to be circulating because she's going to be hyped that they're in the playoff and it's a playoff atmosphere and it's the first. Look, for all the people that doubt who Notre Dame is and their brand and all of that stuff, right? They selected Notre Dame to play in the first ever college football playoff that's in a home stadium.
Yep.
The first ever
host. They will host the first ever home field playoff game in college football history.
This is what I'm saying.
Freaking awesome.
Look, if you ever want to think about where Notre Dame is in the landscape and all of that,
$20 says that's not true.
Oh, Ryan.
$20 says that's not true.
I hope Ryan's in the press box and does that. That's what I want to say.
He won't be there for Irish Breakdown if he's not going to be wearing a shirt. That's for darn sure.
Oh man, but look, and so look, Notre Dame is who they are. They've got the primetime slot. I didn't see who the other primetime slot is. My guess is going to be Ohio State, Tennessee on Saturday night, but I didn't get a chance to see it. But those are the two big.
It's going to be Penn State and SMU at noon.
Okay.
It's going to be Texas and Clemson at 4, and then Ohio State.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how I would have predicted that it would be.
100%. Yeah. And look, here's the thing: the 2 primetime games are the only show in town. Those are they're unopposed. It is the 2 biggest brands in Ohio State and Notre Dame. They get the primetime slots. The other 2 games are going head to head with the NFL, which. Yeah. That's not.
Are they going to have games on that Saturday?
Football. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they've got games that Saturday, so they're going head to head. There's a 1:00 game and a 4:00 game, so that's tough for the college football playoff. But the 2 games that are unopposed, Notre Dame's, Ohio State's, not surprising.
No, not at all. And I'll be honest. I mean, we didn't talk a lot about it. I really like these matchups. I really do. I don't know how fun the Texas Clemson game is going to be because I think Clemson is I'm not sure how I feel about that matchup for them, but I like that Penn State SMU game. I think that's going to be a much better game than people think. And I think that Tennessee Ohio State game is going to be a really fun game to watch. If you like defense, you're going to really enjoy watching that football game because those are 2 very well coached, really productive defenses. Tennessee's more physical than Ohio State, but those are 2 of the better defenses in college football this year.
Sure.
And Tim Banks and Jim Knowles are both, I believe, nominated. They're both semifinalists for the Broyles Award, along with Al Golden. So that's going to be, that's going to be a fun football game. And it's going to, for Ohio State, it's a, you kind of got embarrassed last year in the postseason playing an SEC team that wasn't considered one of the premier teams when Missouri beat them. Ohio State right now has got a lot of negativity within their program. They've got a chance to, Ryan Day has got a big opportunity. There's no coach to me that has more on the line for his future in going into this postseason.
That's a great point. That's a great
because
point.
if he gets beat in the first round, those calls for his job get really, 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 really loud. Really loud. If he can beat Tennessee and then win a rematch against Oregon, I think Ohio State's path is kind of clean, to be honest with you, for an 8 seed, because Tennessee's is a really good football team. But guys, we talked about this. Winning rematches is not easy.
Yeah.
And Oregon's going to have to beat Ohio State in a rematch. And Ohio State will have a chance to play a game before then to kind of get going against a defense that when they get to play Oregon, that defense for Oregon is going to look like Swiss cheese compared to what they're going to have to face against Tennessee.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden they're going to then play the winner of the Texas, Clemson, Arizona State group. So the path is really set nicely for Ohio State despite being the 8 seed. But if you don't get there, the calls for your job get really, really loud for Ryan Day. And if he loses to Tennessee at home, oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm all here. I'm here for that chaos.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you look at how Ohio State was supposed to be put together this year. And with, the coaching hires and bringing in Chip Kelly to take over the offense, and you go out and you get Will Howard and Quinshon Judkins, and you get all these guys to come back like Igbuka and Travion, and you go get Quinshon and Caleb Downs and all these guys. Jim Knowles is going into his 3rd year. The expectations for me at a minimum, also along with like what the national media was the expectation was to win the Big Ten, beat Michigan, and make a playoff run. And right now they're 0 for 2, And so to your point, I think Ryan Day, his future in Columbus. Now, I don't know if he gets fired. Like, I don't know if the AD is waiting for him on the, in the locker room in the tunnel on the way back if they lose to Tennessee. But if he doesn't get let go after the playoffs, his name will have to be number 1 on the hot seat list going into 2025, right? So, no, I'm with you. Ryan Day's job is somewhat hangs in the balance in what happens with Tennessee, for sure.
Vince, you got any other thoughts about sort of the bracket? Let's kind of go through. Let's go through.
They're releasing the rest of the top 25.
I was looking at that just now. Yeah, you want to go through that real quick?
Yeah, might as well. Go ahead.
Memphis 25, which is where they were last week. UNLV fell down 4 spots to 24. Colorado is 23. Army moves up 2 spots to number 22, so they will play a ranked team. Syracuse moved up a spot to 21. Most of these are just people moving ahead of teams that lost. Syracuse climbs up to number 21. Let's see here.
I don't think they've done.
That's all they've done so far. Illinois is number 20. So is Iowa State seriously only going to drop a couple spots after getting annihilated by Arizona State? Are you serious?
Clemson only went up 1 spot.
Missouri's they're only going to drop Iowa State 1 or 2 spots after getting annihilated. They only fell 2 spots to number 18. Missouri's 19, which is a joke. Then Missouri's 19, by the way. BYU moved up the numbers. Iowa State only dropped 2 freaking spots after getting destroyed by Arizona. In a game, guys, it could have been way worse. It was 45-13 in the end of the 3rd quarter.
Yeah.
South Carolina fell a spot to number 15. So they got leaped by Arizona State. Ole Miss fell a spot to number 14. So the top 15 went exactly how we said it was going to go. And then obviously you're going to have Miami at what did we say 13, right? Because Arizona State jumped up to 12.
Yeah.
Right. So then you have Miami at 13, and then Bama's probably 11 because they said those teams aren't going to move. So then you'd have Bama at 11.
Yep. Because Alabama's first team out. I mean,
right.
Which makes sense.
Right. Right. So that's the top 25, fellas. That's the top 25. So
they didn't show as much love to South Carolina as people thought that they were going to.
Well, I mean, that was a given because what they had said is they're not going to move teams.
Right. I mean,
didn't play.
that was more of the story last week than I think it was this week.
And I think they should have probably given them a little bit more love. We talked about that last week. I mean, head-to-head is supposed to only go so far. You know what I mean? And that's my issue with this committee is they put way too much emphasis on a couple of games for each team. Way too much emphasis on a couple of games as opposed to the entirety of the resumes.
Yeah.
And like, there's no way you can look at the entirety of their resumes, who you played, opponent wins, number of teams with 500. There's no way you can look at it. Game control, margin of victory. You can't, there's no way you can look at the overall resume and say Penn State's better than Notre Dame. There's no way. It just says,
Correct.
Okay, this team lost to this team and that team lost to that team. And that's the only justification because you can't say they have a better win. Their best win is by 14 points at home over the number 21 team in the country. Notre Dame's best win is by 35 points on a neutral field over the number 22 team in the country. And I'd be willing to bet you the next group of schools, like if you look at the AP poll, A&M was the first team out, Louisville was the second team out. If they did a top 40, which is what I actually think they should release a top 50. Yeah. I think the playoff committee, now they don't have to do it for the show, but release a top 50 because why do you get more credit for beating the number 25 team than you do the number 26 team? You know what I mean? And so that's an issue that I have with the whole process. But I'd be willing to bet you that there's a lot more Notre Dame opponents that were considered for that next spot than there were Penn State opponents considered for that next spot in the rankings, right? So what it all comes down to, that one game, that one loss. And that's not how it should be. It should be about who you are for the entirety of the season. This committee, more than any committee we've ever seen, they narrowed the criteria way down to the point where they ignored Alabama having 3 bad losses because they wanted to focus on their one great win. That's what they did. And I think that's the biggest flaw that this entire team, entire thing had. And it's not just Notre Dame. And you could look at it with South Carolina and Ole Miss and Alabama. There's only one criteria that you can look at and say that Ole Miss deserves to be ahead of South Carolina, and that's the head-to-head. So that trumped everything else. Everything else. South Carolina lost to an 8-4 team. South Carolina lost to who Ole Miss also lost to. They lost to the number 11 team and the number 14 team. Ole Miss lost to a 4-8 team, a 6 and I think 2 6-6 teams, right? A 7-5 team and a 6-6 team is who they lost to, right? So, Alabama lost to the 2 6-6 teams and I keep forgetting Alabama's third loss. They lost to 6-6 Vanderbilt. They lost to 6-6 Oklahoma, and Tennessee, right? Tennessee. So that's my issue. The biggest issue I have with this committee, fellas, is they narrowed the criteria and the focus down so tight, but then didn't apply it evenly throughout the teams. You know what I mean? And that's kind of my issue. I mean, you could say, okay, Texas had a better loss than Notre Dame. That's the only thing that Texas did better than Notre Dame. They didn't have a better margin of victory. They didn't play a tougher overall schedule. They don't have better wins. Their best win was Notre Dame's second best win. And that team's not in the top 25. It's all came down to one data point. And the nice thing, the reason I've defended the committees in the past, fellas, is because I thought they did a better job of looking at it in the entirety of their resume. And this committee did not. And it's not just Notre Dame that was affected by it. I think Ohio State was affected by it. Ohio State is lower than Penn State for one reason and one reason only. They lost to Michigan. There's nothing else that happened the entire season that should make us think that they are worse than Penn State. We watched Ohio State and Penn State play a game where Ohio State had the ball with a chance to win it at the end, and they far outplayed Oregon compared to how Penn State played against Oregon. It's that one Saturday at the end of the year, and that's something that I think this committee is the biggest flaw of this committee, is the lack of consistency with which they applied criteria and the fact that they narrowed the criteria down to a very, very, very small number of things and did not actually do what they're supposed to do, which is look at the entirety of the college football playoff or the entirety of a season. That's my issue.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that the committee got lazy. They just didn't want to use all of the criteria that they had before when they only had to do it for maybe 5 to 6 teams in the playoff discussion, and now they had to do it for like 15. And I think that they just made their decision to say, hey, these are what we evaluate the most, and this is what we weigh heaviest, and that's just what they stuck to, which is really frustrating. I'm with you.
Guys, I do want to talk about these matchups, these other matchups a little bit, if you guys don't mind. Let's start with the 5-12 Texas versus Clemson matchup. This is going to be a very intriguing game because Clemson showed me a little something yesterday that I didn't know that they had in them, to be honest with you, which is ability and willingness to throw the ball down. If it's the second game in a row, they've actually been more aggressive throwing the ball down the field, unlike the South Carolina game where they stopped in the second half. They kept attacking, but this is also the second game in a row where Clemson has allowed a team that they were beating to come back and get in it late. And that's something they're going to have to deal with. But and then Texas, Texas struggled against Georgia. I think Georgia's just a bad matchup for Texas. I don't know that Clemson presents that same problem. I don't know that Clemson is good enough in the front seven, or at least they haven't shown it really so far, to really shut down this Texas offense. I thought they did a pretty good job of it early against SMU yesterday, but we saw in the second half, once SMU got rolling, they were able to move the ball on them. So my overall thoughts are, yesterday Clemson got outgained 458 to 326. The game really came down to SMU had 2 turnovers and Clemson had none. Right. So, I think Clemson's second score was off of a short field after a fumble. Yeah. 4-play, 28-yard touchdown. Their first touchdown drive was a 2-play, 33-yard drive, also off of a turnover. Once they kind of stopped turning the ball over and shooting themselves in the foot, actually, they had a punt that was returned back a bit. And then it was the first possession was a fumble. Clemson scored. Then they had the punt and, they returned it far and then got a penalty, and that set up their second touchdown. So their first 2 touchdown drives were both really short drives. After that, SMU outplayed them. They just had the turnovers. That's what really killed them. I don't know that Clemson has enough to beat Texas, right? That's my initial thought.
That's going to be tough. Yeah. Go ahead, Trevor.
No, another thing too, outside of playing clean football, is like Cade Klubnik also played really well yesterday. He had no turnovers, 4 touchdown passes, willingness to throw the ball down the field. And it's hard for a team. We just got done talking about how important the rushing game was this past weekend, and Clemson was still able to win despite having like 62 total yards on the ground. Mm-hmm. And Cade Klubnik showed me a little bit of something. Like, he showed me with a playoff berth on the line and with a conference championship on the line. He was willing to go out and play his probably best football of the season. So I'm not saying that's going to be enough for them to overcome and beat Texas, but it was a facet of the team that I didn't think they had. Like, Cade Klubnik to me was kind of like a Drew Aller, good quarterback, but not a championship caliber quarterback. And one of them won a conference championship last night, the other one didn't. So it's going to be interesting to see how they match up with Texas. But I think, again, kind of like what we talked about yesterday, Texas is going to have to find ways to run the football. Yeah. And now I don't know if Sark is going to be willing to do that because he has Quinn Ewers and some athletic receivers, and he wants to show how smart he is. But one thing prevailed yesterday, and it was the team that was the most physical and able to run the football was going to be the team that wins. So, I'm going to be interested to see what he does. Going to be really interested to see.
Yeah, on the road against Texas is going to be a different animal, obviously, than being in a pretty pro-home situation in the ACC championship and a place that they're used to winning. Look, they've won like 8 of the last 10 ACC championships, right? It's kind of, they own that place, right? And so, going on the road to Texas is going to be a different story. Now, with that said, I said Clemson was going to lose because I didn't believe in Cade Klubnik. And he proved me wrong. Like, he didn't play very well at the beginning. There was a stretch where he didn't play very well. I sent you guys that graphic that they put up on TV, where he was on fire early. Well, they were leaning on the running game, and he really had to do a whole lot, had 3 touchdowns. And then he had a stretch where he wasn't very good. And it was like, okay, will the real Cade Klubnik please stand up? And it was like, it's not great. And then he played. And
Yeah.
and they won this game in large part because of how he played. And I give him a lot of credit for that.
Yeah.
And in this game and in this situation, I give him a ton of credit for that. It's going to be a different ball game going down to Texas. So if he can go down there and win that game, man, I will officially be a believer in Cade Klubnik. I will say that much. But as I look at this game, though, he's a detriment in this game. I feel like, I'm still going to ride that train a little bit, right? He had a great game last night. He had a great game overall. But going down to Texas is a different thing.
Here's the one interesting thing about going down to Texas. He's going home.
Yeah, good point.
He's from Austin.
Good point.
Like this is going to be a really interesting story. I don't know. I don't know that it impacts the game, but it creates a very interesting because him and Jaden Greathouse are from the same high school, Austin Westlake.
Right.
He's going back to Austin where he's reliving his glory days. And I also say, who do I better trust to get a team ready for a playoff game? Steve Sarkisian or Dabo Swinney?
Good point.
Right. At the end of the day, I just don't know that Clemson has the horses.
Right.
That's kind of my thing is I don't know that they have the horses, but I don't think they're going to get whipped. Like even the Clemson game where they got blown out, like Louisville did something that I don't know that other teams have really been willing to do against Clemson, and Louisville went right at them. And I think that played a big role in their victory. And I think Louisville has got a much more dynamic receiving core than a lot of people want to give them credit for. But Louisville went right at Clemson running the football. And is Texas going to be able to do that? Are they going to be willing to do that?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a big question mark. It's what's funny is, Jeff Brom, for all his pass game genius, if you look at their two most impressive wins this season, as far as like beating your rival, blowing out your rival, beating Clemson, in both games, it was their running game that actually fueled them in those games. They ran for 358 against Kentucky, and they ran for 210 and only passed for 156 against Clemson. The two games they threw for the fewest amount of yards, guys, was Clemson and Kentucky. Is Texas willing or able to do that? That's the question. South Carolina, what gave Clemson problems when they played South Carolina? It's a very mobile quarterback who could rip them up on the ground. They gave up 267 rushing yards to South Carolina. Is Texas going to be able or willing to do that? I don't know the answer to that. This is a Clemson team that's given up 21 passing touchdowns this season. This is also a Clemson team that has picked off 15 passes. So there's just intriguing matchups all around. We'll have more. I think it's going to be a tough go for Clemson, but I do think this is going to be at least some really interesting storylines going into this matchup. Does Dabo have one more run in him? You know what I mean? I don't know. The other matchup, guys, number 6 Penn State against number 11 SMU. I think this is going to be a really a very entertaining. This might be the second most entertaining first round game if you're someone who likes offense. Because as we saw yesterday, and the one thing that we got right about the Oregon Penn State game, because we all thought Penn State was going to get beat soundly. I think I had a 14-point game. Trev, I think you had an 11-point game. Vince, I think you had as a 25-point game. But we all saw it. But the one thing we were right about, what we were wrong about was Oregon's defense. What we were right about was Penn State struggles with athletic pass games. SMU has an athletic pass game with a mobile quarterback. It's exactly kind of what we saw yesterday. And once they got going against Clemson, Clemson had no answers in the second half of that game. None. And that allowed them to kind of climb back into that game. And on the other side, SMU is going to struggle with Penn State's size. If Penn State commits to running the football against SMU the way that they did against Oregon, and you're like, where has that been all year? Then, this is going to be an interesting game. I actually think this is going to be a competitive football game, guys, and a lot of points are going to get scored. I think this is going to be a fun matchup. It's going to be interesting. You think about Notre Dame, you're from Dallas, Texas, and you're coming up to play in Happy Valley. College, you know what I mean? Like it's just Penn State. I don't know how that's going to be a snowy, cold day, fellas. Vince, I'm
Yeah.
curious as after when Trev starts talking about his after you give your thoughts on this game, I'd be curious if you could look up the weather tracker of what it's supposed to be like in State College, Pennsylvania.
I got you. Look, hey, I think we can all agree, Penn State got the easiest draw in this thing. I think personally, I think they got the easiest road. This was the road that I think was reserved for the 5 until there was some upsets and stuff last night.
Clemson
right?
beat SMU, right?
Like this was the path for the 5 seed, and then Penn State falls into the 6, and they get that path. And so if you're a Penn State fan, you got to be pretty happy right now after, maybe being upset about what happened last night and whatever, that's fine. But you've got to be pretty happy with your draw right now. If I was Notre Dame, I would have really loved to have the 6. But whatever, I'm fine with the 7. So Penn State got the best draw, in my opinion. I know that's something we were going to talk about. So I will say that I feel like SMU, as Trevor said, they weren't ready for the spotlight. And I'm hoping for their sake that they now understand what it's going to take to operate in the spotlight. And that, look, the odds are going to be greater in this one than they were last night. No doubt about it. This is a bigger hill to climb. But I also think that SMU has some players. They have some athletes that can take advantage of what Penn State brings to the table. And I, as I'm looking at the 4 first-round games, if I was going to pick like an upset or whatever, I'd be hard-pressed to not go here for a potential upset. I look, Penn State showed me a lot last night, though, too. So I will say that. They showed me a lot. But I think SMU can make this a game, and I think they've got every opportunity to potentially win this game on the road. Now, are they going to be able to handle the elements? I'm going to look that up in a second. Are they going to be able, to go up against a brand like Penn State? They're going to be able to operate in a whiteout. Obviously not snow necessarily, but a whiteout,
it could be both.
It could be both. It could be both. All of those things it's a big hill to climb. But I think they learned a lesson last night. I will say that. I think SMU learned a lesson. Look, they almost learned that lesson within the game last night.
Yeah.
And obviously got beat out by a 56-yard field goal. But I think they learned a valuable lesson here. And Penn State's going to have to stay focused for this one. They can't just sit back and anticipate, oh, man, we're going to win this one, and then we got Boise State, and we're in the Final 4. You know what I mean? And start looking ahead. If Penn State starts looking ahead at this thing because they got a perceived easy draw, that could be dangerous for the Nittany Lions. So that's kind of where I'm at with this one.
I think another storyline for this one, too, that I think is going to be interesting is the coaching matchup. Because on one side, you have James Franklin, who his whole thing is he just can't win big games. Now, last night, he gave his team the best opportunity to do that, in my opinion, because I think James Franklin coached better than what he has in a big game since the, USC 2016 Rose Bowl, So I think that's going to be interesting. But it is going to be a thing where can SMU, I don't question the athletes that they have. Like from a speed perspective and from like a talent perspective, I think SMU can compete with anybody in the country. But let's be real here. I think any of these teams can. They're in the playoffs. It's you don't get here by accident. But again, for Rhett Lashley, it's going to be, can you prepare your team in back-to-back games? Now, mind you, it's not 7 days apart. They're going to have time here. But can you prepare your team to go from playing in the ACC Conference Championship to traveling to Penn State, one of the largest stadiums in all of college football? Which is in SMU, there's no argument to be had. They haven't played in this kind of environment in their regular season. I mean, you know what I mean? So it's going to be interesting to see who can compare what. From a football matchup standpoint, yeah, I mean, can SMU handle the size? Can Penn State handle the speed? And I think it's going to come down to that, because one thing that we saw yesterday is SMU at times struggled with the bigger Clemson team, and Penn State all night struggled with Oregon's speed. So I think for those reasons, this matchup gets really, really interesting. It's going to be kind of similar to, I don't think the outcome is going to be similar. I don't. But it's going to be similar to what we talked about in the Iowa State-Arizona State game, of which I guess which negative is going to show up first. You know, like how we talked about what's going to show up first, Arizona State not being able to defend the pass or Iowa State not being able to defend the run. And obviously we got that answer. For SMU Penn State, I think it's going to be what's going to show up first. Penn State, again, not being able to handle the speed of a very fast SMU team, or SMU not being ready for the moment and able to handle the size. Also, I don't think it's beyond a shadow of a doubt to say, is Penn State going to be ready for the moment? Because from what we've seen, when they get into this moment, they don't typically come out on top. So I think that's why, for me, those are all the reasons why this matchup is more interesting than what some might think.
I will say this, guys, because I'm putting the updated top 25 in there. I think last night could be a really good thing for Penn State. Sometimes in defeat, you realize, hey, guys, we're pretty good when we play a certain way. And I wonder how those Penn State kids are going to be crushed with how they lost, but I think they're going to also look at this and say, hey, guys, we're a pretty good football team. And there's not a lot of football teams that can go put a 45 on that defense. Like, SMU's not going to put up 45 on Penn State. If they win, it's going to be a much closer score to the one where they beat Clemson last night, right? Like, but I think that game could end up being like we hammer on Penn State all the time, and they have no business being ranked at Notre Dame, in my opinion. But guys, they showed me something last night, and I think if we have that reaction, then I think those players can have that reaction as well. Let's wrap it up, guys, talking about this 8-9 matchup between Notre Dame or between Penn State and goodness, I'm going to eventually get it right. Ohio State and Tennessee. It's going to be at Ohio State, as we talked about. Vince, you said it's going to be at 8:45 it's going to be 8 o'clock on Saturday night. Big time matchup. I think Tennessee, once again, is a year ahead of schedule. I thought Tennessee's team 2 years ago was a year ahead of schedule, and that cost them because the next year they lost a lot of guys from that team that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise lost had they been more of what we expected them to be. And then that took a step back. And then this year, I think they're a year ahead of schedule. I thought next year is when we would see this version of Tennessee. And it just speaks to the job that I think Josh Heupel's doing. They go into this playoff playing better football. Obviously, they got whipped by Georgia. But I thought they bounced back really well. And guys, I honestly thought Tennessee was on the verge of falling apart. I really did. We saw them lose to Georgia. Came out in the first quarter against UTEP, don't score a point. They ended up blowing them out, but UTEP stinks. And they fell behind at Vanderbilt. It wasn't like 17-0. And I was like, they're going to quit. They're going to fall apart. And they absolutely just destroyed Vanderbilt the remainder of the game. And it showed me a little something, but those things aren't going to carry over as much into this game as the preparation for this game and the matchups and such for Tennessee. I am concerned about how much the drama surrounding the program is going to impact Ohio State. That, to me, fellas, is the biggest storyline. You got to talk about that before you can talk about matchups, in my opinion, is can Ohio State's players – I mean, nobody's going to have more noise coming from the outside into their program in these next 2 weeks than what Ohio State's players and coaches are going to be dealing with. Nobody.
To me, this is going to come down to talking about, like, if we're talking about before the individual player matchups in that discussion, it's going to come down to Ryan Day and his ego. I said that they lost to Michigan because he has an ego. Because he had heard all week long about, Michigan runs the ball on you whenever you want. You're not a physical football team. Like, is he going to let that thought creep in again? Because that allowed Ohio State to have a game plan that didn't play to the strengths of their team because they're not a physical football team. And that's fine. Oregon showed last night that they're not a crazy physical football team. Penn State ran all over them. Yep. They still won the Big Ten. So if you can take ownership of who you are, I think Ohio State's chances of winning increase. I'm not going to call a winner of this game because I think out of all of the early window games in the first round, this is probably one of the closer matchups, in my opinion, because both defenses are so good. But Tennessee right now has a really good rush defense. They're fourth in the country in yards per rush. And I know that noise is going to start creeping in for Ryan Day. Hey, Tennessee has a really good defense. This is an SEC front seven. Is Ryan Day going to have the mindset of, oh, yeah, well, we're Ohio State and we have Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, so watch what we can do on the ground, and then lose in a similar style of game like you did to Michigan? Or is he going to have the mindset of, that's cool, I don't know if you have guys that are going to cover Jeremiah Smith and Igmika Buka and Carnell Tate, and you know what I mean? So that to me is going to be the deciding factor. Will Ryan Day finally just take ownership of, fine, that is who we are. Let's see you beat us at who we are. So I think that's going to be a huge, huge storyline.
I have a theory. The Michigan game, this will not be a close game. Ohio State, Tennessee will not be a close game. Here's why I say that. When I mean not close, I mean like 10 or more. It's not going to be like a 30-point.
Sure.
10 or more. And here's why I say that. And I'm not saying who's going to win. How will Ohio State handle the loss to Michigan? It either affects them, the noise gets in, the drama gets in, they're having to answer questions about their coach's future. They're going after this coach. Oh, they want Marcus Freeman. They want Mike Vrabel. They want this guy. Urban Meyer's going to come back. Every other freaking bullcrap rumor you can imagine is going to go into this over the next couple of weeks, because a lot of people that run websites and media publications got to get paid with the clicks the next couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
Does that get inside the program? Does it affect them? Does it bother them? Does Ryan Day feel like you said he has to go prove something? No, we're going to go run on an SEC team. Or do they take proper lessons from that game? Does it galvanize this football team? Does it say, hey, we're going to come together as a team. We're going to get pissed off. We're going to play with a chip on our shoulder, and we're going to play like we're capable of playing. And that is pushing the tempo, attacking down the field, making this a game where it's about Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Buka and Brandon Ennis and Carnell Tate and those guys, and not our desire to run the football and prove something to ourselves. You know what I mean? And so the Michigan game is either going to be the best thing that ever happened to Tennessee or the worst thing that ever happened to Tennessee when it comes to this matchup, guys. And I don't know the answer to that, Vince. I don't know how Ohio State's going to handle this. I have no clue. But that's why I say they're – and when I say it's going to be a blowout, if it phases them and gets in their heads and they don't come together and Ryan Day kind of does Ryan Day things, then I think Tennessee could whoop them, because I think that Tennessee defense could take this game over. And unlike Michigan, if Ohio State's not locked in, they got Dante Thornton. They got Dylan Sampson. They've got Nico. I mean, they've got things that they can do to hurt Ohio State if Ohio State's not locked in and the noise gets in. But if Ohio State is locked in and they use all this stuff as fuel, right, tackling fuel to kind of go into this next game, right, and they're locked in and motivated, then I think they can work Tennessee. Because the one thing that I've said about a lot of these SEC teams, I said it about Georgia, I've said it about Ole Miss, I've said it about Alabama, I've said it about this Tennessee team. If you beat them, you can do it through the air. That is where all these teams are vulnerable. None of them have typical SEC secondaries. And if Ohio State is smart, they will go at that. And they will apply a similar pressure package, especially on third down against Nico, that they did to Curtis Rourke, and force him to miss some mistakes. Say, Dylan Sampson is not going to beat us. You're going to have to beat us with Nico throwing the football and with Dante Thornton and those kind of guys. Dylan Sampson is not going to beat us. That's the storyline. And say, you're going to have to cover these cats. So that's good. That's what makes this this is going to be the hardest game, in my opinion, for us to evaluate and for us to predict, because the unknown of the outside noise is going to be, it's going to be, how do you know how Ohio State handles this? We know what they're going to say. But how they handle it, that's going to make this that's why I say I don't think this is going to be a close game. I don't know which way it's going to go, but I don't think this is going to be a close game.
I don't disagree with anything that you just said about the off the field stuff, because Ohio State and Michigan have a very unhealthy obsession with each other, which can be healthy at times, but when it's not healthy, it's really not healthy. And I think Ohio State is trending right on that line right now. Going on the field, I honestly think that this one, I think both teams are going to want to run the football, right? I think the elements are going to dictate that. I think both teams want to play that way. But I think what this comes down to is who's going to make the most plays, Will Howard or Nico. That's what this one comes down to for me. I don't think that they're going to have to put the team on their shoulders, either one of them. But the one that plays better is the one that's going to win And I don't know who that's going to be yet, because Nico is obviously a freshman. He's a young kid. He's kind of learning on the job, the whole thing. And Will Howard has been less than spectacular this year, to be perfectly honest with you. And, in a big game situation, is he going to go into his shell? Like, I don't know that we have the evidence that he's not going to do that right now. And so, when the big orange machine comes up to Ohio and Columbus and all of that, and, what that looks like, and this is the closest on paper matchup, I think, of the first round games. It's in prime time. It's the last of the first round games to be played. Everybody's going to be watching this game. It's going to be a lot of pressure, right? The last time that was the case was the Michigan-Ohio State game. Didn't end very well for Ohio State, obviously. So, I'm not saying I have a ton of confidence in Nico right now either, because I've seen him make some pretty disastrous mistakes at times in big moments. And so what is that going to be like? And I realize when you're doing like quarterback versus quarterback, they're not actually playing against each other, but who's going to make the plays to get their team over the hump? Because in a game like this, it's not just going to be the run game. It's also going to be, they're going to have to make a play. Like the quarterback is going to have to make a play at some point to get them over the hump. Which one does that? That's going to be the biggest question mark to me in this one, because both Will Howard and Nico are coming from completely different places in their career and different all of that. Which one can get them over the hump? I think that's the biggest question mark for me, and whoever does is going to win this game.
Any final thoughts, Trev, about this matchup before we do have a couple super chats that we'll get to, guys, but anything else as far as the matchup of that particular matchup? Who do you guys – so, like, very early, we'll do more. We'll break down film. We'll dive more into the matchups. We'll do an official predictions thread. But just initial gut reaction, who are the four? Are you guys all taking the high seeds to win in the first round? Is everybody taking the higher ranked teams to win?
Chalk, yeah, I think chalk is the smart way to go. Like I said, if I was going to pull an upset, I would think real heavily on SMU and Penn State.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But if you're telling me that you're going to take away my house if I get one of these wrong, I'm going to go chalk.
Okay.
I would say yes, with the one question mark being Tennessee and Ohio State. I think a lot of the off-field things going on with Ohio State's going to be a factor, more so than in other years. Like I've seen people bring up, the 2022, game against Georgia, and Ryan Day wasn't in fear of losing his job going into that game. It's just I think there's going to be a lot of outside factors, and Will Howard's a guy that I don't know if I fully trust right now. Now, to Vince's point, you're looking at it in two different lenses, because I don't know if Nico's been in a lot of positions in big games, the amount of big games that Ohio State has played in for him to have an opportunity to go out and win or go out and lose a football game. But I've watched Will Howard on the final drive against Oregon have a bonehead slide. Outside of that, it was a decent game from him, I would say. And against Penn State, I watched him throw a pick six early in the first quarter. And against Michigan, I watched him just have probably his worst game in an Ohio State uniform. So if I'm weighing on those options, like it's easy for me to say Carnell Tate and Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith and Brandon Innes have to go out and make plays. The guy facilitating them the football also has to be pretty sharp that day too, against a pretty good Tennessee defense. So that one for me, if I was going to predict an upset, I think it would be Tennessee over Ohio State. But with that being said, again, I guess I don't have a mortgage. I live in an apartment. But if I had to bet my hypothetical mortgage on it, I would say that all the
your future mortgage.
Yeah. On my
bet your future mortgage is on it.
Don't do it. Owning a house sucks.
Yeah. It's awesome.
So
it's going to be really fascinating, fellas. We do have some super chats before we get out of here. All right. We got one from Lou Holtz, Thunder and Bolts. Gut reaction. If you're Marcus Freeman, what's your message to the team based on this? Do the rankings change the message at all? I don't think they do.
No,
that's something in Marcus Freeman. He's been very good at as all these other coaches are out there politicking for their team's place in the college football playoff, Marcus Freeman's been like, we don't have any control over that. We're focused on beating this team. We're focused on beating this team.
Faceless opponent.
Exactly. And not so much a faceless opponent. He's focusing on the only opponent that they have any control over, which is the one right in front of them. You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm saying. Like, hey, we can't control what seed we have. We can only control that we play Indiana.
Look,
and we got to go get ready for Indiana.
It's the same message. It's the same message he's had since September 8th. Don't change it.
Be
It's
the
same
best
message.
version of ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
In the
been
interval,
his message. Yes,
all of that stuff.
and
Like,
all that stuff applies. It doesn't change now
no.
that you're in the playoff. And people say, people got mad at him when he was like, look, our goals aren't about record. They're not about points. They're about
Right.
playing to our standard.
Right.
If you play to your standard, then they'll beat Indiana.
Right.
If you play to your standard, you can beat Georgia. So the message shouldn't change. If you get into this whole, they can't, they're disrespecting us, they're doing that, the committee, none of that's going to matter. It's going to have a negative impact on their team. Now, the motivation I think he can use is just you keep saying what you're saying, let Curt Cignetti run his mouth and make sure your team hears that stuff.
It's going to be glorious.
Right?
He's going to, this is the best part about a guy like Curt Cignetti, and I like Curt Cignetti. I want to put that out there.
Heck of a football coach.
I like him as a football coach, and if he was my football coach as a team that I root for, or as my son playing for him,
love it.
I would love it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if I'm his opponent,
I also love it.
Sit back, baby. Just sit back and let him do his thing, man.
Because you saw Ohio State coaches and players the whole time taunting Curt Cignetti because his thing was like Ohio State sucks and Michigan sucks, and when he got hired, he was doing that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
But the beauty of social media is you don't need a bulletin board anymore. Like,
no,
people know that there used to be bulletins in locker rooms where you'd put up things,
newspapers.
Yes,
yeah,
and that's where that came from for you young cats. That are like, well, what's a bulletin board? That's what Google's for, man. Look it up. But Trev's like, what's a bulletin board?
I had a bulletin board in my room. Okay, stop it.
I would still print it all off though, and I would put it all.
But you don't have, but see, because that is you distracting. They will see it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Then the captains can kind of take that.
Yeah.
You don't need to say it. Now, I'm sure, knowing Marcus Freeman, there will come a time when he will say something to his team as we get closer to that game about that. But just let him run his mouth. The message will not and should not change. It shouldn't change if they go play Georgia. It shouldn't change if they get to play Penn State. It shouldn't change if they're playing, hey, guys, we're playing national championship. So what?
Right.
Guys, this is about winning the next snap in front of you.
Yeah.
Leaving it all on the line, playing our brand of football, playing to the best of our ability, and then whatever happens at the end of that 60 minutes happens at the end of that 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And as long as he continues that consistency of message, then I think we'll see Notre Dame continue to play at a high level of football.
Agreed.
Yeah, easily. Notre Dame doesn't need any more bulletin board material than what is going to be naturally and organically raised from Curt Cignetti, one. And two, like, the fuel for the fire for Notre Dame is their track record in big games since 1993. Like, can we be real about that for a second? Like, that's the fuel for the fire. The fuel for the fire is you haven't won a New Year's Six Bowl since 1993. The fuel for the fire is, hey, people don't think that you belong here. Like, if the message is, man, they put us at a 7 seed when we should have been a 5. That's BS. That's a Ryan Day bullet board material, dude. Like, it is. So that's the difference. If Marcus Freeman can say, it doesn't matter who we play, like that's part of the reason why I have the mindset that I do. Like, I was concerned and I was interested to see where Notre Dame was going to fall. But at the end of the day, Notre Dame was going to end up playing somebody
good.
And it's going to be somebody good. It's going to be one of the best 12 teams in the country. And it doesn't matter who it is. Like, you have to go out and play them. Notre Dame can't control who they play. Not anymore. So go out and prepare the way that you need to, and that's playing your standard of football.
I'm going to say something, and I want you guys to agree with me.
I agree.
Or not. Excuse me. Tell me if you agree with me.
we agree.
You guys agree with me, okay?
All right. I agree.
Otherwise, paychecks are not coming. No. I want you guys to tell me if you agree or disagree with me, okay? I was looking at Vince, so I knew Vince was going to agree with me. So, Trevor, I'm not sure about. Vince, we always think the same way, man. It's not an insult. Looking at the way that the 12, 11, 10, and 9 set up. 5 would have been the ideal for me because I would have liked to have played Clemson, then I would have liked to have played Arizona State if your goal is to be the easiest path. However, if I'm looking at matchups and my option was 6 or 7, SMU or Indiana, I'm happy with where Notre Dame's seating was because I think actually SMU would have been a tougher matchup for Notre Dame than Indiana is because they both throw the football really well. They both have talented running backs. They both have quarterbacks that have put up a lot of yards this year. One of them is very mobile and difficult to handle, which we saw Notre Dame had a little bit of issues with against USC. The other is more like Tyler Shuck. He's going to sit and he's a way less mobile version of Tyler Shuck.
Mm-hmm.
And I think between those two, do I want to face? They're both very good football teams. Do I want to face Kevin Jennings or Curtis Rourke? If I had to pick between the two, I'd probably go with I'd rather face Curtis Rourke than Kevin Jennings, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I look at it is from a matchup standpoint, I agree with you. But I'm somebody that believes that Notre Dame can match up with any of the teams in this playoff. I really do. In the same light that I think that Oregon can match up with anybody in this playoffs. And I think that, Texas could on paper, like it's, but
Georgia, Ohio State. Right.
Exactly. So that's not just Notre Dame centric. It's Notre Dame is one of, to me, 5 to 6 teams in the playoffs right now that can on paper match up with anybody that they come across. For me, I like this draw because of the narrative that it's going to produce. Because there are a lot of people out there that think Notre Dame is ranked too high. And, well, we see this every year. Notre Dame plays nobody. They get into the playoffs and get blown out. They need to play in a conference. Well, I don't really think anybody's going to write home about Notre Dame beating SMU. We respect SMU because we evaluate film and we've watched them play and we know what kind of football team they are. But everybody's on the IU hype train. They love Signetti and IU's coming out of nowhere and they're no longer just a basketball school. It's like, well, I mean, IU plays in the Big Ten and that's in Notre Dame's backyard. And Notre Dame should join the Big Ten and all this other stuff. And so I think the narrative, if Notre Dame's able to beat IU, that scope is also going to look better than if they beat SMU. That's how I look at it.
Got another super chat from Beaston88. I just got your text, Vince. Thank you for your super chat, Beaston. Just lazy by the committee. Teams are rewarded for winning a conference title game. They should be penalized for losing. Indy, IU, then Georgia blows. I agree with your first part. I don't agree with your second part. I think the committee was very lazy. I think if you're going to reward a team for winning the championship, you should reward a team for how they lose it. If they lose it in a way that's not overly impressive, the team that I thought should be least affected by the outcome yesterday is probably SMU because of the manner in which they probably then Texas second and then Penn State third, because at least SMU and Texas both either had a tie game or a lead late in the game where Penn State literally never trailed.
Right.
Never led.
Yeah.
The only tie in that game, I think, was 0-0.
Yeah, it was.
In that game. So it's a little bit of a different animal. And the reason I say Texas second is because you did lose to the backup quarterback. You had a lead when their starter got knocked out, and then you lost.
And you couldn't hold it. Yeah. They literally on the next drive went down and scored on you. Yeah, that's not great.
Yeah, not good.
Not great.
Tyler Evans with a super chat. Thank you, Tyler. How mad do you think Bama fans are right now? There is not a madder fan base in college football right
Correct. now. They think they run it.
I mean, Yeah, I mean, they can be mad. I mean, there's a sense of entitlement with, to be fair, one of the best dynasties that we've seen in on a sports run with Nick Saban. I'm all aware of that
dynasty of my lifetime.
Oh yeah.
Because of how long it stretched.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and this is the way that I look at it. You can be mad. You can be whatever. The team that you love and support should have taken care of business. I don't know what else to tell you other than that. If Notre Dame was in that same boat, if Notre Dame missed the playoffs because they lost to USC in the final week and they went 10-2, which based on all the chaos, I don't know if they would have gotten in. But then it's a question on if they deserved it or not. Would I have been mad? Yeah, but I would have been mad from the aspect of, I think Notre Dame's a better team than this, and I think they could have competed in the playoffs. But I'm not going to say it, and I know it's probably going on Twitter right now. Alabama got screwed. And it's well, you didn't get screwed. You lost to 6-6 Oklahoma.
Don't get beat by 2 6-6 teams, and you'll be
right.
If Alabama just beats one of those 2 6-6 teams, not only would they be in, but I would say they should be in.
Yeah.
If they're 10-2 and they would have been ahead of SMU even before yesterday, because they do have some really good wins and they did play a very challenging schedule. They did.
Yes.
But you lost to 2 6-6 teams. So don't talk to me about how tough your schedule is, because you didn't lose to the good teams on your schedule. You lost to crap teams on your schedule.
Right. Right.
Chief Brody with a super chat, my man. Thank you. Genuine chance to see the first major postseason win in my entire lifetime. Also on the lighter side of the bracket. How can you complain? See you in South Bend. I can't wait. I don't know the particulars of it yet, but we will have some sort of tailgate that day. I have to look into some different things about, are we going to actually do something on campus all day, or do we rent out a place where everybody can come to sort of earlier in the day? I'm not sure.
I'm working on Friday, baby.
I get that. Well, you don't get off that late, buddy. It's an 8:00 game. You can get off work and come over to the stadium.
Yeah, you're not wrong. That's just a long
I don't want to. I had a long day. Long day. I don't know the particulars yet. We'll work all that out, but we will do something on Friday as an IB community. So just be on the lookout for that. So if you're coming for the game, we would love to see you.
I'll be up there.
Steve with a super chat. Can't wait. Steve with a super chat. Steve says, let's go. If we are the team we think we are, we should beat IU the same way Ohio State did. Then we get to take down Georgia. Then the semifinal should be Penn State or Boise, which is just fine. Steve, I love that mentality.
I'm with you.
You know what? We can't control the committee. Let's do it. Bring on the tougher path. Bring on the better teams. Let's do it. Let's get it done.
Yep.
Let's get it done.
I'm with Steve. I have no problem with the path for Notre Dame. None.
Yep.
Because I do think Notre Dame should win those games. I do. So, and I'm not saying they're going to blow everybody out or like that's not the course I'm taking. They should win those games. They should.
We're at the point now where Trevor said it phenomenally after the USC game. I'm so excited to be at the time of the season where margin of victory is irrelevant.
Yes, just win, baby.
You could win your if Notre Dame wins their 4 playoff games by a combined total of 4 points, I will celebrate the national championship just as much as I would if they won them all by 40.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter anymore what margin of victory is. What matters is, did you win the game? If you win your first round game by 40 and you lose your second round game by 3, guess what?
You're out.
You didn't get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't get it done.
Mm-hmm. I don't care if Notre Dame wins 4 straight games, 6-3, 6-3, 6-3, 6-3.
Exactly.
I don't care. I don't care. It's not going to mean anything.
Right.
It's not. I mean, oh my goodness, I'm so happy that's out the window.
Yeah. I did notice, guys. I was looking real quick at ESPN to see if any lines had come out yet.
8.5.
And well, I've seen 2 different ones. Vince, you said 8.5. That's what it is at ESPN.
No, that's what it is on the sports books.
Okay, on ESPN they have whatever their ESPN bet thing is. It started at 7. And it's now up to 8. The thing I think that I got a little disagree with is they have the over under at 50.5. I thought it'd be a little bit higher than that. Penn State is an 8.5 point favorite. Texas is 11.5 point favorite, and Ohio State's a 7 point favorite. I am shocked that the first round games are all significantly bigger spreads than what we saw yesterday in the conference championship games. Shocked.
Ohio State being 7 point favorites in this game and Oregon being 3.5 point favorites over Penn State is crazy.
Agree.
That's crazy to me. All right.
Texas being 11 over Clemson, I totally fine.
Yeah.
That's fine because Texas. I mean, the way Clemson got in, like I get it, and they're technically the 16th ranked team in the country. Like, okay,
yeah, they've played what, a few teams like them, and yeah. Yep, it's going to be I thought that was interesting when I saw that, by the way. All right, let's get some more. Fat Fish with a super chat. Thank you, my man. Super sticker. Thank you, my man, very, very much. Also had one as a Notre Dame fan. Love the seat as a bartender. Wanted Clemson. Yeah, those cats can throw down a little bit.
Well, you're going to get plenty of crazy IU fans coming out.
But the difference is going to be, Vince, I think you would have probably seen a lot more Clemson fans staying in the area.
Yeah, that's fair.
Where a lot more Indiana fans are going to come and leave.
Well, they're already here.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Some in the area, yes.
Just all you got to do is sit through basketball season to know who the IU fans are. Like, they're everywhere. They're before this year, they're very quiet during football season, and then they come out of the woodwork during basketball season. They're here. Don't worry.
Well, one of the things that I've learned too, especially growing up around that area, is there's a lot of Notre Dame fans that are fans of football and then are IU basketball fans,
which is weird.
But they're riding that football train now, you know. But it'll be interesting to see what happens now when they're playing Notre Dame, obviously, because I think there's a lot of people that are like, I want to root for both, you know, that kind of a thing.
Nope.
But you know,
you got to pick a side, man.
Right.
You can't root for the Americans and the British.
I'll tell you right now,
root for the colonies and the crown.
I will be getting in a fight with people verbally who are like, I don't care. I love Indiana football in general. Like, you know,
pick
if an
a
Indiana
side.
team wins, no, pick a side. And to
You're
deal with
either
that
with us or you're against us.
You're darn right. Come on.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I love it, Vince. All right. We got one from Connor Van Syok. I hope I got your name right, my man. I apologize if I didn't. IU, a volatile Georgia team, possibly without their quarterback, and likely Penn State to get to the Natty. Hard to not like our chances. I'll be honest with you. I'd rather face Carson Beck than Gunnar Stockton. With what I saw from what Georgia wanted to do in the second half of that game. Yep. Harold Eustache. Thank you, Harold, for the super chat very much. Appreciate you. Notre Dame shouldn't be scared of any team. It's the playoffs. Let's go get it. We should want Georgia. Harold, you
my man, Harold.
I love the comments of people that are like, screw being upset about the seeding. Bring on that team. Because if you don't want Georgia, if you didn't want Bama, then you don't think this is a championship football team. And I don't want to get your hopes up and you beat two nobodies and then you get blasted in the semifinals because you didn't play anybody that got you ready for those moments. So I love it, Harold. I agree with you completely. Joe M with a super chat. Thank you very much, Joe. Last December, Vandy canceled the game versus SMU in Nashville, which was to take place this season. If Vandy had played and won, is Bama in the college football playoff? Absolutely. Because Vandy would have had another non-conference loss and they would have had a common opponent. So absolutely, if they had won and Bama would be in the playoff. But here's the other thing too, even if they didn't even need all that, just freaking beat Oklahoma.
Yeah.
If Bama would have beat Vanderbilt, it doesn't even matter what SMU did. Guys, and an 11-2 SMU is not getting in over a 10-2 Alabama team with wins over Georgia and wins over Missouri and wins over blowout win over Wisconsin, who's not that good, a blowout win at LSU. Like, that team is not getting left out if they're 10-2. We can forgive you for one bad loss. Can't forgive you for two.
Sure.
That's why Ole Miss is in. That's why Bama's not in. That's why Georgia is in, because their losses were to who? Bama and Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Two top 15 teams. That's the difference. Mm-hmm. Just win one of those freaking games, and you're in the playoff. So Bama has nobody to blame for them not being in the playoff except themselves. So to Trev's point, they can be mad all they want.
Yeah.
You got blown out by a 6-6 Oklahoma team. Be mad at your coach. Be mad at your quarterback. Be mad at your players. Be mad at your defense. Don't be mad at the committee.
Yep. They have the right to be mad. It just depends on what lens they want to look at it through.
Yep. Got about 6 more of these. Got one from Joe Papiti. Joe, thank you so much.
Oh, Joe.
Thank you for always being there. It literally took me a solid 15 minutes to be okay with this ranking. I still think this committee hasn't applied any consistent logic to any of their rankings all year. Go Irish, beat IU. Joe, I saw your comments earlier in the show, and I have no issue with you thinking the committee's rankings are total bull crap, because they are bull crap. It's not just Notre Dame that got screwed by the rankings. Several other teams got crap rankings as well. I still don't think a 2-loss Ohio State team should be behind a 2-loss Penn State team.
Agreed.
I just don't. Ohio State has way better wins than Indiana does, or than Penn State does.
With one of them being over Penn State.
Yes, and their one loss was bad. I get that. But the rest of the criteria, everything else favors Ohio State over Penn State. So it's not just Notre Dame that got shafted by crap rankings this year, guys. But the other thing, too, is Notre Dame, there was no worst case for Notre Dame. The worst case was not being at home. That was the worst case.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
As long as they're hosting, let's roll. Let's roll, son. I mean, that's it. That's where it's at, man. As long as they're hosting, it's let's roll. Let's roll. Carson Jackson with a super chat. Thank you. What percentage of IU fans are in South Bend?
Oh, well,
and Trev, you guys are more local. What would you guys
say? So again,
say?
it's IU basketball is who the fans
say who are both. Who are the Indiana fans that aren't Notre Dame fans in football? How many? About what kind of number would you put that at?
I don't know. Like, I'd probably say somewhere close to 40, because there's a lot of people that I grew up with that are like my age and you're a couple years above, a couple years below, that like went to IU Bloomington for college and then moved back.
Yep.
You know,
there's a ton of IU fans. They're
not
not outward about football until the last 4 months. That's the thing.
But
I mean, just look, go to a Notre Dame basketball game when they play IU. There's more red in the stands than green or blue or whatever color you want to call. So, I mean, IU basketball is above everything else, and there's gonna be a lot of IU fans that come out of the woodwork, that have come out of the woodwork over the last 4 months to root for football, and that's great. I have no problem with that. But there's a bunch, there's a ton, look. If I was going to take a poll of like high school seniors in the high school that I work at, you know, there's a good chunk of kids that go to IU. It's IU and Purdue are the top two. That's where most of the kids go, right? So those are instant IU fans, and a lot of them come back.
Yep. Teacher Hunter, Super Chat, are you at the game, degenerates? We will all be there. But I know he wasn't asking us because we're not degenerates.
I might go up there this afternoon, just sit in the parking lot and wait for December 20th.
Trev, just so you know, by the time we get December 20th, you will be unemployed if that's the decision you choose to make. I'm just
buddy, I got a hotspot.
Okay.
I'll bring the laptop.
We're not doing the show from your car every day for the next 2 weeks. Okay. So you can come hang out at Elkhart, but you will no longer have a job if that's what you choose to do. Beastin 88.
Oh, you got to go back. You didn't do that.
Oh, sorry, Joe. Joe Papiti, what currently injured players should be back for the playoffs? We don't have an answer for that. Marcus Freeman is going to meet with the media at 4:00 today. Hopefully,
he's not going to give a whole lot of.
Hopefully, he'll be asked about some of those. I would expect Howard Cross back. Other than that, I don't know.
Jeremiah Love, I think, is going to be healthy.
Yeah, we've addressed that one,
but
I don't know that Kingston will be ready for this game. I don't know that one, and I don't expect any of the guys that were injured early in the season to be back. Marcus Freeman's already addressed that. Jagasol won't be back. Ashton Craig won't be back. Boubacar won't be back. Jordan Patejo won't be back. Benjamin Morrison won't be back. Those guys won't be back. So it just really it's that. And Logan Thomas is already back. It's that group of guys. Beastin 88 with a super chat. Thank you. Thanks for all the content this year, boys. Let's freaking go. I think that's what LFG stands for, right? Let's freaking go. That's what I'm saying.
That's where we're at.
Hey, the year's not over, partner.
We got time.
23 days left. We got a lot of great content. John A1 with a super chat. Thank you, John, so much. Congratulations to Notre Dame. My apologies, Coach Freeman. I was done, and seeing this team go out and just smack teams has been great. Bring on Indy. I have seen a lot of people, including like my dude Andrew Gilmore, who's been super negative a lot of the year, came out after the USC game and said, you know what? I was wrong on Coach Freeman. And you know what? That's good. Good on you guys. Ryan did that. Ryan said this team won't change, and said, "Hey, I was wrong. This team's got better." So, respect to all of you that were down on him, thinking he wasn't the guy, and he still hasn't proven he's the ultimate guy, right? To win a championship, he's still got to prove that. But the job he's done with this football team since that Northern Illinois game is nothing short of exceptional, in my opinion. Now it's finish the job. Football's about finishing, fellas, right? It's about finishing. And then last one from ND Milton fan. Thank you so much for the super chat. What position group matchups are you most excited to see from any team in the college football playoff? Mine is our O-line versus the Georgia D-line. I would say it's not so much the O-line versus the D-line. It's more so there's two matchups. It's Al Golden versus Kirby Smart.
Yep.
And, like that defensive matchup, or you could say Mike Denbrock versus Kirby Smart. But then even more so, it's Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Riley Leonard as runners against the Georgia front seven. That's the one I'm most excited about. Of course, I'm a Notre Dame fan, so that's one I'm going to be most excited about. I think that's going to be a matchup that I'm always going to be more excited about Notre Dame matchup than anything else, right? Yeah. I mean, that's where it's at. The next one is going to be, I really am looking forward to watching that Tennessee defense against the Ohio State offense. I think of the first round, that is going to be the most intriguing matchup to me that I'm excited to see. Yeah. I don't know if it's like this group versus that group, position group. I haven't got that much into the weeds, but there's just something about that Ohio State Tennessee matchup that I'm just really looking forward to watching that game. What version of the Ohio State offense are we going to get? Very, very, very curious to see that. Do you guys have any others that pop out in your heads?
No, I was just going to say my favorite matchup I'm going to watch is to see if there's somebody in the playoff field that can tackle Jeremiah Love in space.
And Jadarian Price. Yep.
Our pass defense, Notre Dame's pass defense versus Rourke is going to be a big one.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, and an IU fan was in here, just talking, and that's cool. And he said, their IU's quarterback is better than Notre Dame's quarterback, and it said if we can stop Notre Dame's run, it's going to be a big IU win. That's a big if. That's a big if.
Okay? A lot of teams have had that if.
Yeah, that's a big if, man.
Well, and is Rourke better than Riley Leonard at throwing? Sure. Okay.
But is he a better quarterback? I'm not so sure I'm on that bandwagon.
Right. That's the difference.
Because guess who's also part of the run game?
Right.
Riley Leonard.
Right. So. And that's what I don't think enough people kind of put an emphasis on is like, okay, it's not just rushing that matters, right? So like this year, Curtis Rourke on the season, we'll just look at the numbers, right? I mean, On the season, Curtis Rourke, he passed for, 2,827 yards in 11 games. He averaged a total of 254.7 yards per game. That's what he averaged this season. And he finished with, 29 touchdowns. Riley Leonard on the season, in 12 games this season, averaged 234.4 yards per game on the season. And like Curtis Rourke, sat out a lot of fourth quarters. Riley Leonard accounted for 30 touchdowns, and Curtis Rourke accounted for 29 touchdowns in one fewer game, right? Neither turned the ball over. I mean, their numbers are very close, and their impact this season is very similar. Who plays better in this game is going to have a big impact. There's no doubt. I'm not going to sit there like, oh, Curtis Rourke. No, guys, it's a good football team.
I'm not saying that either.
The issue is going to more so, in my opinion, be there's going to be some Notre Dame fans that dismiss it, but there's going to be a lot of Indiana fans who have bought into the BS narratives about this Notre Dame team. They're going to be very surprised.
Mm-hmm.
We heard it from Georgia Tech fans. We heard it from USC fans. We heard it from Army fans. We heard it from Virginia fans. We heard it from actually Virginia fans didn't. Army fans were actually like, should we sit Bryson Daly and not play him against Notre Dame? There was actually a contingent of Army fans that did that. But we've heard this all year. Oh, Notre Dame sucks. Riley Leonard can't throw. Okay. Let's see what happens. Yeah.
I mean, look, IU's could probably try to load the box to stop Jeremiah Love, and that's fine. And look, Riley Leonard's got to come play. He's going to have to come to play. This is a playoff game.
This isn't going to be the first time that's done that, too. Like, that's the funny part. You think the first 12 opponents, last 6-7 opponents didn't be like, hey, we should probably load the box.
Right.
They're trying to stop Jeremiah Love and Jadari
Do
Price
it.
and
like,
Riley
do
Leonard.
It. That's fine. Do it. That's great, man.
Right.
Like, come on.
Right. Last one, guys, from Tyler Evans. Thank you so much, Tyler. Tyler says, let's go win in thanks for Super Chat. Let's go win in Atlanta 2 more times, gentlemen, and make it 3 for 3 wins in Atlanta. So obviously I got that wrong. It won't be 2 more games in Atlanta. It'll only be 1, but it will be 2 for 2 in Atlanta, hopefully. If Notre Dame wins 2 games in Atlanta this year, they're national champs. They already got 1. They got beat Georgia Tech at Georgia Tech. So, so that's it, fellas. So great show today, fellas. Why don't you guys, Vince, why don't you take us out of here, man?
You got it. Hey, thanks everybody for joining us on a special edition, a little Sunday afternoon edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. We appreciate that. I don't even know what I'm on anymore. But no, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. It's going to be a fun one. This is just kicking off, kind of the second season and what this is going to be, the first ever 12-team playoff, and the first ever 12-team playoff game is going to be played at Notre Dame Stadium at 8 o'clock on Friday night, the 20th. So really looking forward to it. I'm actually excited that it's going to be IU. I always enjoy when I can shut up a neighbor. So,
but just you better hope Notre Dame comes to play.
You're not wrong.
It's going to be a miserable year.
Hey, look, it's not going to be any more miserable than having to listen to Michigan fans after they won the national championship. So I'll just say that right now.
That's true.
But hey, everybody, thanks for joining us. Make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Share with your family and friends, and of course, give us a 5-star review if you have that opportunity. And jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. There's going to be all kinds of good stuff over there over the next 2 weeks and beyond. So make sure you check that out. So for Trevor and Brian, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast, everybody.